Peter Alexander, my colleague, would say a little bit more about AI World, our platform, and how the EU's current agenda fits these developments. And as you know, many of you know, because otherwise you wouldn't be here, there have been many developments recently, the EU agenda. We'll hear about some of them. Some things still need to happen. Some things have already happened. Some things have been announced. And it is high time, also because we are in this interstitial moment between the present and the next MFF, right? The next budget cycle of the EU. It is potentially the perfect timing to reflect a little bit on the actions that have been undertaken, on the next ones, how the EU will likely be able to navigate this ever-changing environment, right? And one of the things that have happened lately and on which we've concentrated quite a lot of our attention, you will see a publication coming out of SEPS in the coming few days by Federico, this guy that come here, and Susanna is a co-author, another researcher at SEPS, on sovereign AI. We have just published at noon today another paper that looks at AI factories and gigafactories and tries to also look at the numbers, whether they are being approached in a way that is likely to create a drive towards competitiveness in the EU. And a lot of this goes in response to an emerging urge in the landscape of AI in many, many countries, which is an urge to own the AI revolution and transformation a little bit more, to not depend or reduce excessive dependencies, at least for some parts of what we call the technology stack on other parts of the world, but also to develop an autochthonous approach to how AI should be developed, or designed, developed, and deployed, and implemented in various sectors of society and the economy. In other words, bridging the AI revolution with the concept of technology sovereignty. So we wanted to kickstart this discussion with a contribution on this topic. And, some of you know that we at SEPS run also a platform called Forum for International Cooperation on AI that we run with the Brookings Institution. Recently, we have organized a series of talks within that context that includes several governments from around the world, but also academics and so on. We had a series of presentations on the topic of sovereign AI to discover what is happening around the world. The best paper that we found, the best series of contributions that we found is a series of contributions that come from our friends at Imperial College. One of the co-authors of this stream is Aldo Faisal. Aldo is professor of AI neuroscience at the Department of Computing and the Department of Bioengineering at Imperial College London. I understand, but Aldo, correct me if I'm wrong, you're also involved with this new venture, which is very fascinating at Imperial College, called Institute for Convergence Science. And so we invited Aldo to share his thoughts about sovereign AI in a keynote presentation. So that said, I will not wait any longer and give the floor to you, Aldo. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you very much for inviting me here. As you will see from my CV, I'm not really a policy person. I am a professor of AI, and I lead the two centers in AI for healthcare and AI for digital healthcare at Imperial College. These are the largest research and training centers in AI for healthcare in Europe, actually. And I'm co-director of a new school of convergence science in human and artificial intelligence. And I explain to you now why a healthcare professor is going to talk to you about sovereignty. So first of all, I think we are all aware that accelerating pace of innovation and accelerating global challenges really require a full stack of thinking. We're now going from innovation to ethical challenges, policy, law shaping, regulation, assurance, and product release. Well, you've seen it in the example of ChatGPT in record time. So we cannot expect to wait for these steps to be completed, moving from one community to other. So our response at Imperial was very clear. We need to think full stack about problems. And that means for us as engineers, as computer scientists, we need to take our technological foresight that we have and use that practically and immediately to think about domains of application from ethics and policy and regulation and assurance. And we think this can help somehow ride this wild beast of technological innovation that we're seeing. And so we created these schools of convergent science. The idea is not to do just interdisciplinary science, say a medical doctor and AI professor work together, but really transform the way we think to the full stack to achieve impact, while at the same time be aware of societal, industrial, and ethical implications that you have in your technological development process. So that's the convergent science approach. We launched a few months ago. We had already President Macron and the CEO of Mistral for a visit, and of course also a gentleman described as the CTO of the United States on the recent state visit of Donald Trump was visiting us to hear and learn about our convergent science approach. So I want to talk to you about sovereignty, and I think we've all seen the news of different events that impact the technological landscape, from tech billionaires shutting down communications operations of the internet for a country under aggression. We've seen concerns, especially in the Southeast Asia regions, about use and abuse of AI technologies, all the way to loss of services for international organizations, to mysterious drone sightings appearing left and right in the news. So for the definition of what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about sovereign AI. So this is AI to us, where governments and multilaterals have greater influence versus systems that are controlled exclusively by foreign private sector. And at this point, I want to make very clear, when I speak about sovereignty, it does not mean to talk about provincial, I do everything alone. It means, like in a good relationship, to be able to stand on your own feet and be a stronger partner, right? That's what we're talking about. It's not about unilateralism. And specifically, after much consideration, we started working on the topic of sovereign AI in defense. And again, defense is not military for me. I work on AI to save lives, not to take lives. But defense is more than military. But not everything militarily is defense, right? So this is about the assured capacity of a state to govern, deploy, and where necessary, override AI systems critical to national security, ensuring that they remain under domestic legal control and within the strategic alignment. And of course, we've seen investments. Germany's putting up to €1 trillion into the investment infrastructure. Ministers are demanding, for example, now in response to the recent drone sightings, the rapid build-up of capability. And the question is, where does this capability come from? Can this capability be threatened, say, for example, by economic, trade, and tariff negotiations all of a sudden? So this is what we need to be aware of. And so we are coming from that we want to think about embracing national agency, but also international cooperation at the same time. So it started a while back in 2023 when we hosted a range of events at Imperial, of course, noticing that at the time the one major model, ChatGPT, was controlled from a narrow region of the west coast of the USA, to work we did with the UN Trade and Development people, our release of our first white paper on general consideration regarding sovereign AI and national AI policy, that we then took to the Policy Summit in Zurich and to WEF in January. We've then worked on energy demands and how this is being shaped in that domain, and our current white paper on sovereign AI in defense. So I will try to focus on the rationales and operating domains and suggest hypotheses about what we need to think about in this domain. Of course, a lot of discussions are happening in parallel in the background, and I don't want to recapitulate them. But perhaps the single most important aspect that I have is, yes, I'm delighted to see that Britain has their sovereign AI supercomputer called Isambard AI. It's the 11th fastest on the planet. I'm delighted to see that the EU is ramping up AI factories to the tune of billion-dollar scale investment. But as you can see from the sad faces of the people at the Davos summit in January, these are all technology company representatives looking forward to sell AI hardware. The challenge is that in the domain of sovereignty, we're often overlooking that sovereign AI is more than just hardware. So first of all, sovereignty means that you need to have governance over your data. In Europe, it's less of a problem. In Asia, it's a bigger problem. Then the next challenge is you need to have sovereignty over your model. You need to decide how that model is structured and built. And if you now point me to Mistral as the shining example of a European controlled model, we should be able to discuss to what extent the Microsoft investment actually makes it really an independent model. We need to talk about training and alignment. So how do I build that system? And crucially, in AI systems and foundation models, there's a very substantial element of what we call reinforcement learning with human feedback. So this is where, like a child, you're parenting your model and teach it what is acceptable to say and what's not acceptable to say, what makes sense and doesn't make sense. ChatGPT 3 and 3.5 where ChatGPT 3 was aligned with people who were willing to work for $20 an hour in Silicon Valley, okay? And then 3.5, lost the anti-Semitic, anti-women type statements. Once was trained up to 1 million hours. Most of that training happened for $1 an hour in Nigeria, okay? So it's values are imparted on how these models are aligned. We don't know how they're aligned. We don't know what questions were asked. We don't know how these models were educated. It's proprietary information. If you don't control it, you don't know. And I don't need to say in a place like Brussels that things don't translate across languages. An ethical understanding that I can express in English in one language will not port easily over to other languages, right? So that's an important element to take into account. Obviously, compute. Yes, we need to be able to compute and build our models, otherwise you can't go anywhere. Then the next challenge that we have is the operational governance. Who turns this model on and off? You can commission to have your model built, trained on a commercial system, but can you then turn it on and off at your liking or not? Do you have the operational governance of your model? And the next important dimension is that you have the legal and ethical sovereignty. Is it under your jurisdiction? How does your jurisdiction control the elements of what you're doing in that domain? So these are the 6 dimensions of sovereignty. And all too often, people talk just about compute or about data. But if you don't have them all together, you have a challenge. Now, when we're talking in this domain, specifically in the domain of defense, we need to think about, operational assurance. Can you do what you want to do? And again, I'm not talking about the smart drone that does something in the battlefield. I'm talking about everything else that you depend upon, from logistics, from your hospital system being able to work, from food coming to the supermarkets for the civilian population, right? You need to have, therefore, legal and ethical accountability over your systems. You need to have strategic autonomy. You should be able to decide what you're doing, not in dependency of what others allow you to do. You need to have credibility within your coalition, be that the EU, be that NATO -1, be that NATO, be that NATO +1. You need to be able to think about how we're going to be good partners. And ultimately, we need to think about domestic industrial resilience. So how can we maintain operations of our regular industry, keep our economy working, under threat and attack? And I give you an example from healthcare. So the national healthcare system in the UK is the single largest target of nefarious state actor hackers in the world. Because it's one system, 2 million employees. If you bring that down, you hamper the British healthcare system substantially, right? So we have now in gray zone conflicts the fact that we're being targeted at a civilian level to disrupt infrastructure. Okay, so as I said, when we're talking in these environments, there's just the military defense. I'm not a military person. I'm not going to talk about that. We need to think about civil defense. What you do if things are under direct attack, your water grids, your energy grids. We need to think about societal defense. How do we ensure that we're not manipulated in our elections, as may have happened in Britain a while back, and other situations, that you can maintain your society's operation without too much foreign interference? And you need to maintain economic continuity. I think these are fairly straightforward and obvious aspects. So if you think about the more military domain, I don't want to go into the details here, but I think what's becoming interesting from a military's point of view is that standard operations and command decision support, tactical operation of the military, they know what they need to do. And in those pipelines of military procurement, they know how to ensure that they have sovereignty over the technology to a certain extent. Yet, remember the discussions we had about the F-35 fighters. Will they take off no matter what? Or somebody needs to press a button somewhere to make them function. The fact that there was uncertainty, at least at societal level, had an impact on political decisions. But what I wanted to focus on are these two other aspects. Cognitive security, so that's our security, not be manipulated in hearing about things. And of course, the logistics aspect that is often transferred to civilian operators and are not military. So even in the military defense domain, the military needs to think about maintaining cognitive security of the countries as well as the supply of goods and services. So what we need, therefore, is to think about what principles of assurance can we have that things are going to work. We need to evaluate that, and very often we don't, because we have very rich and complex tech stacks. A classic example of that is what happened to Russia after they attacked Ukraine, that there was a number of open source software developers that were deep within the software stack of computer vision algorithms. So this is software that uses software that uses software. In 4 levels down, there were some British guys who were developing a little tool that everyone uses, and they coded in there that they were checking for Russian or Soviet Union domain names, and if this code was run there, the code would fail. And this is such a deep dependency, no software developer can see that, but they quietly sabotage things, and allegedly it helped Ukraine in the first few weeks or months of the war in that sense, right? So this is, open source is now soft power, and you can disrupt things. I'm just saying, the stacks are so complex that we cannot see that anymore. So we need to think about how we manage that assurance. It's clear that AI infrastructure is critical infrastructure for that reason, and I'm talking also about healthcare infrastructure, government infrastructure, tax infrastructure, local government, welfare and pensions. If you can disrupt these, and there's an increased use, at least in the UK, of such technologies, of managing these things, then you have problems. You want to contain your legal and ethical control over systems, that's clear. But what we're thinking is, when you're thinking about the amount of sovereignty, we need to be risk-based. I think there are just 2 countries in the world that technically can afford to develop their own complete native tech stack. That's the United States and China. Everyone else will need to compromise to a certain extent, right? So to be able to do that, you need to be very clear about a skill strategy of talent, right? There are tons of EU people in Britain, like me, who contribute there, and there are tons of people flowing back into the EU, of course, as well. So this is a skill strategy that we need to think as partners. Now, if you want to have assurance, ultimately, you need to evaluate that. You cannot just certify it on a piece of paper. This means we need test beds that allow us to evaluate how will the system operate under shutting down these and these services, say from these and these providers. We need living labs where we can and living labs can be, for example, entire hospitals, and see what happens if we shut down certain elements. What happens if Microsoft Copilot goes down, as an example, right? And we need real-world evidence and testing. So one of the fantastic transformations that we saw since the pandemic, that real-world evidence, so not a trial where you manipulate things, but simply observing the data that you're getting from the real world, has been increasingly accepted, even in life-death situations. And we need to think about how we can evaluate systems in that domain. So our recommendation, and I'm speaking here as part of the Trusted AI Alliance, that we propose the implementation of a national assurance framework that treats AI safety as a first-order defense priority, as important as drone defense and other forms of defense. And the critical thing here is that we need to think about not a binary, everything is sovereign, nothing is sovereign. We need to be somewhat soft to that. We need to be mission-driven, and we need to be modular. So in what domains we want to use that. So it's not a binary, sovereignty is not a binary status, but it must be dependence on risk, function, and mission criticality. So it's a trade-off between capability and cost. It's ultimately also a trade-off between national autonomy and international influence. If you keep everything to yourself, no one will benefit. Think about the open source example. Think about now how the US administration is now very open to sell their hardware to China. Yeah? And ultimately, it's also a trade-off between strategic independence and technological cooperation in this domain. So with these thoughts, I would normally end the talk, but because I like to walk the walk, not just talk the talk, I'm showing you how we're actually doing that. So in March of this year, we received funding from the EU and from the British government to start building Nightingale AI. What is Nightingale AI? It's a foundation model built on biomedical data. So ChatGPT reasons over text. People have used ChatGPT-like systems to reason over medical text, but that's to me like a literature student reading a medical textbook and answering your questions about medicine. What we wanted is a system that reasons like a medical doctor. So we're using the millions of data records that we have in the UK, because we have very early digitized, to build a model, a foundation model that reasons over biomedical data. And as part of this effort, we're now very actively talking with the European health data space people, foremost at the moment with the Germans, but we're also talking to the Finnish people. And as of last month, we have now even an American hospital care system that wants to contribute to this. And for this model, it's a sovereign AI model. It's not a British model, but it's a sovereign model that is, so to speak, under public sector control. It's not private in any way. And so we're illustrating many of these aspects that we're talking about. We're building it according to these principles. And I have to say, building this model, and we now have received 1 million GPU hours. That's a big number. What it actually means is we have now as much compute as OpenAI had for GPT-3, right? And we're securing more and more anonymized healthcare data to train and build these models. And we're trying to build it according to these principles that I've outlined above. And so with that, I'm coming to an end because I want to hear your view. I've spoken often enough about this. And I'm here. You can find my LinkedIn there. Unfortunately, I have to give a talk at 7 in London, so I need to leave in about an hour. But my dear colleague George Woodhams is here. There's George. He's from our Policy and Program Forum of the School of Convergent Science, and he would be delighted to help you connect and go forward. And if you want to read the 83 pages of Sovereign AI and Defense, you can get the LinkedIn from there. What I want to extend an invitation to, we're going back to Davos this year, and it's clear that we need to work on healthcare, because I know quite a lot about that, and as part of that, once you have defense, you have healthcare, we can really start talking about AI for public sector, sovereign AI for public sector, and we are very keen on looking for partners who are interested in working with us for that. We've built software tools and evaluation matrices. So when I say that there's a trade-off between capability and cost, and in what domain you want to have how much autonomy, you have an actual AI-powered software tool that allows us to trade that off if you're a decision maker, for example. And with that, I hand back to Andrea, and happy to take your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aldo. Fascinating talk. We don't have a lot of time for questions, so I will collect just a few because, as you saw, our agenda is super dense. And already, so Martin with his hand up. And anybody else wants to ask a super short question that requires a super short answer? Martin, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I keep it short. Martin Hallen from the Bertelsmann Stiftung, working also on tech resilience and sovereignty topics. Thank you so much, Aldo. Very, very insightful. But I'm going to push you a little bit. In particular, I would be super interested in your perspective on the topics that you described today. Very interested also in the health dimension, but in context of the recent trade agreement with US and the whole Oracle NHS dimension around this. Be very interested in your risk perception in this.
Okay. I need to tread carefully because I think there's one perception that the British government clearly communicated as part of the discussions, and then there's a practical level that may look slightly different. So, for example, Palantir originally was actually not that much involved, and they never got the NHS data. They got the administrative data, not the patient data, for example. And now we have, of course, with the Ellison Institute funding the Tony Blair Institute and the Ellison Institute itself, where when you meet people from there, it's unclear whether they work for Oracle or for the Allison Institute. That's very open questions that we have there. But again, they are talking to us about getting involved, and they don't have that level of involvement at the moment that we see. So I think it's more nuanced. The British government set up a sovereign AI unit in March of this year, and they're actively working on running a sovereign AI program. So Nightingale AI is a flagship of the British government's sovereign AI initiatives. So I think multiple things happen in parallel. We need to be good friends with our friends, but we need to also make sure that we can stand on our own feet.
Thank you very much. I have Scott Marcus. Martin, can I ask you to pass the mic back to Scott?
Hogging the mic. Okay. Hi, I'm Scott Marcus. I'm senior fellow here at CEPS. The Nightingale is really interesting. I was wondering, as you're probably well aware, the European Union enacted a couple of years ago a European health data space that tries to collect for secondary use, which would mean for health research and other purposes, anonymized or pseudonymized health data. Now, it's really early days for that program. If it functions the way that most things in cross-border health function, it will probably be a while before things are really working most places. But there are a few countries like Finland that are really pretty advanced on this. First, does the UK have anything equivalent? And second, have you looked at applying for EU resources in this area to work with Nightingale to fuel it?
So
just a second, Aldo. I don't know if Alessandra, you had a question. Can you ask it super short, because so then we save a bit of time collecting too, if you allow me. Yeah.
Hi, Alessandra Chirico Consulting. I've been working in defense cybersecurity, so I'm fascinated by your presentation and the defense dimension you underline. But still, if I may, I would like to ask you, which were your, say, interlocutors in the EU to gather evidence, to gather facts on sovereign AI when it comes to defense? And did you talk to the industrial sector or to the European Commission? Could you please clarify?
Sure. Just very quickly. Oops, I've been taken offline. If somebody...
No, if you go back... Oh, okay.
My slides are offline.
Yeah? Sure.
So
someone has
to
change the source.
AI in defense white paper we did together with the Ministry of Defense of the UK, but we were the authors. They were they consulted for us, and we have worked with the major defense operator. We had a hosting of 200 companies that we spoke to. That's standard at Imperial. That's we think full stack. For the HDS, I'm very well aware of the HDS, and I'm very well connected. And the challenge is HDS 2029 really starts. That's when you need to be available. Britain, we have de facto currently 40 million patient records, 10 million alone in London alone, already operational going back to 2009. So we believe, that's a separate talk, that's a talk I'm giving tonight, that by partnering and building a European testbed for digital healthcare, where we can develop such tools together, you can start innovating now with the British data, working together, and then as the European data comes online, then we can really talk about foundation models about healthcare at the tune of 500 million people, which should have enough data to really transform medicine substantially. Very passionate about this topic. Happy to talk more.
Thank you very much, Aldo. You have a super quick question. I know we want to make the most of Aldo's presence, so I'll be flexible with the agenda, with the microphone as well. If you can help pass it on. Please introduce yourself and ask
Hello.
a super quick question, please.
Hello, very nice presentation. I'm Yari Borbon at EY, and a very quick question regarding the 1 million hours GPA time that you have gathered for this project. So I'm wondering, who are the contributors? Are they, I mean, talking about sovereignty, it would be nice to know what is that configuration of those contributors to that 1 million GPA time?
So in April 2024, the Minister of Science called the Bristol Supercomputer Center, can you host 5,500 GPUs if we build a national compute facility? On March 2025, we were computing on 5,500 GPUs. It's called Isambard AI. It's a fantastic team. What they've pulled off in terms of building and setting this up was amazing. It's the first European AI factory for research and academic use.
Fantastic. Please join me and give a big applause to Aldo. Thanks a lot for your presentation. I'm going to call here our Chief Data Scientist, Pierre-Alexandre Ballon. We're going to give you an introduction to the project that we've been running. There will be many things that come back to your fantastic presentation, Aldo. During our presentation, we're going to have to be super quick, Pierre-Alex. So what I'll do, I'll start. There's a presentation that will be help protect us. Okay, that will be coming online immediately. I just would like to give a quick introduction, let me see, to this whole project on the European Ecosystem of Excellence, just to see a little bit how broad it's been over 2 years, to gauge Europe's chances to achieve competitiveness and all the other goals, right? Because it's not just competitiveness, but it's sovereignty, it's security, it's sustainability, and ultimately well-being, if we believe in Europe's constitutional, let's say, goals. And there's been a number of work streams, basically 2 big domains. You will see them reflected in the panels that we have today. One is on AI, and the other one is on AI and the future of work, particularly. And you will see Laura and Cinzia running and moderating a panel about this in the second half of this event. We've been venturing into many of these topics. You see, first of all, letting the data speak, meaning this project is what led us to launch AI World, and Pierre-Alexandre will say more about this. It's a very large repository that is becoming increasingly popular with everything you wanted to ask about AI and never dared to. And we also worked early on the so-called CERN for AI, as it was then called, also in the competitiveness compass of the EU this year. We call it the large-scale initiative on AI. We remain, say, semantically neutral in that respect. Holger, who will be on the panel soon in the next few minutes, has been one of those that we involved early on, and one of those that has been working on the idea of a CERN for AI since 2017, I would say 2018. And we published a paper last year. We continue the work on feeding the reflection on the large-scale initiative on AI. There's work on attracting, retaining, upgrading talent. Pierre-Alex will say something about this, but certainly it will come up in the second half of this event today. We have run a foresight exercise on future scenarios, alternative scenarios on AI and the future work. We have done the work on EU tech sovereignty and the work that has also gone into the reflection on the Eurostack and now on European technology resilience and sovereignty. Martin has been in the lead in that. We've fed our knowledge into that reflection as well. Sovereign AI, again, you see a publication coming out soon on this, but to some extent, the paper on factories and gigafactories that we published today, and you will see some snippets of later, is about that as well, as you could see from Aldo's presentation. We've been disseminating this work through a variety of channels. So this project is also what led us to open a podcast channel, a series of papers, but also bring this research results into our own initiatives and initiatives around the world. One of the ambassadors of this project and also everything that we do about AI is Pierre-Alex. From Vegas to Slush, he's been giving presentations of all sorts. Between, I'm happy when I present with 200 people in front of me. He's got 200,000, right? So in some of these events, Pierre-Alex, bring us through the next part of our presentation and also what AI World is about.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you. Absolutely delighted to see such a packed room. The topic of the day is how to build ecosystem of excellence in Europe. I mean, I think we're all excited about it. So essentially what we're going to be talking about is where we are in terms of this ecosystem of excellence in Europe and what can be done essentially to make it a little bit better and more efficient. So when we talk about AI, first of all, there are many, AI is such a huge umbrella word, but there's many sub-layers. So the 4 big ones are, of course, recommender systems. This is what runs in the background and basically filter the information that is fed to you from what people buy together, what people watch, and essentially is very, oops, Yeah, I'm losing this one. It's very key, but also very hidden. So we don't see it, but it shapes our society, can also create echo chamber. So it's a very powerful form of AI that somehow we are slipping a bit into, but really powerful. Then, of course, pretty much the reason why we have an event like this today is the ChatGPT moment, November 22, and the rise of the large language models, but also now the small language models. Jesus Christ, that's very confusing. I have to look here. And in a matter of fact, for most of the world, AI is ChatGPT, right? I mean, 1 billion users use ChatGPT weekly, and for most of the world, AI is ChatGPT. But again, it's only one small part of AI. And essentially, the next two phases also will be extremely transformative. The first one is the AI agents. We don't live in a world of AI agents yet. AI agents, they make decisions autonomously. They also access tools. And right now, there is a big coordination problem for AI agents and correlation of errors through different type of dependent tasks. We're not there yet, but it's going to be, of course, a massive disruption and acceleration at the same time. And then physical AI. So anything that touches to manufacturing and building capabilities through especially general robots. So robots that can basically evolve and work in an environment made for humans. So again, we try to keep an eye on different type of AI, not just LLMs, but essentially anything that can have an impact on society. And just snapshots, where we are today in the world of AI. The first thing is that, yes, models deliver extraordinary capabilities. So if you would have, told me even 3-4 years ago what different type of large language models can do today, I would not have believed it. And most experts were actually caught by surprise with the rise of, with the ChatGPT moment. And essentially, what we see also is that the AI labs, they're really locked in very, very tight competition. And you see that every major release is an improvement, but we have decreasing marginal returns. So essentially this improvement is getting slower and slower and slower over time. And if we are waiting for a research breakthrough, most likely it will actually come from a different architecture than large language models. However, the true revolution is really how do we apply this technology that already exists to some extent into our workflow. Now, ecosystem of excellence. If we look at the research in AI, to the research side in AI, and these are the major hubs in the world, where basically Asia is shown in yellow, the US and Canada in red, and Europe in orange. Actually, Europe is not doing that bad, okay? And we have big hubs. If you think about the Silicon Valley in the US here, this is the Bay Area, we don't do that bad in terms of research excellence. So Europe is doing fairly well in terms of producing research. However, and Europe is doing so very, very well right here, in terms of producing excellent researchers. So basically, this shows you where the top AI researchers in the world were trained. And Europe is actually not doing bad at all. Look at Europe compared to the US. Now, add Europe, EU basically 27 plus the UK, you start to have a pretty good density of the capacity to train the best researchers in the world. Now, the problem is that in the grad work, they basically go to the US. And then the US also managed to retain this talent in postgrad. So basically, there is a big talent drain problem when it comes to top AI research. And of course, it also comes with the fact that now you have crazy work package, pay package for top AI talent, with crazy numbers like 250 million for the top AI researcher in terms of the pay package. So one of the big issues is to keep the AI talent in Europe. And we have different, of course, we went through a different mechanism of how to close the talent gap. But of course, this is not easy at all. Now, one of the big issues is we do pretty well on research. We do pretty well in training top AI researchers. However, this research mainly stay in the lab. So you start to see now, when we look at patents, when we look at the technology and we talk about AI patents, essentially you see that you have some hubs that popped up, like Shenzhen, like Seoul, like Tokyo, but also the Bay Area is starting to grow. And on the other hand, you start to lose our hubs in terms of European technological deployment in AI. And also, something really, really bad is that we also start to lose our edge in open source AI. When we started working together, we almost wrote a paper about this amazing opportunity that Europe had to actually lead the open source revolution. And at the time, this statement was almost true. Fast forward, and these are like the contribution in terms of like repository on Hugging Face, and you see basically this is NVIDIA, Alibaba, and then essentially either a US lab or a Chinese lab. And there is this big competition between US lab and Chinese lab to lead even the open source revolution, which also came as a surprise because China at the beginning was pretty much lagging behind in terms of open source. And now, if you actually probably like zoom into like what's coming next and you look at the dynamics, most likely Chinese open source model will take over, right? Which is also going to challenge very much the LLMs yes.
And if you allow me a 5-second commercial. That visualization comes from AI World, and look who's showing it.
Yeah, well, that was pretty incredible. And indeed, Jensen Huang reached out because he read a story on AI World, not a joke, very true, CEO of NVIDIA, and asked us actually to put one of the slides, this is AI World, in the big keynote last week on GTC. So that was pretty incredible. That was pretty incredible, I must say, yes. So there are good stuff on thank you. Thank you. There are a few good things. So it's called AI World, and essentially we try to monitor the ecosystem of excellence in Europe and beyond. Now, there is something wrong about the research innovation system in Europe. Unfortunately, there is something deeply wrong. The first issue is the insufficient prioritization. Okay, so we're talking actually about that in our meeting this morning, closed door meeting, on essentially not being able to prioritize a few critical key technologies the way China and the US is doing. The US with the CHIPS Act, China with Made in China 2025, and 5-year plan. It's like a few technologies, but they're very critical. They unleash and they have a lot of applications, but we go very hard on these few technologies. Europe tends to spread too thin, and that's the big issues. Major fragmentation in Europe across member states, across regions. Only 10% of the R&D budget is actually decided at the EU level. 90% is done at the member state level, which means a lot of duplication. And countries like France, they're big enough to think that they can be big enough to lead in the AI world, and that's not true. And essentially, we end up with like a few European champions, but only at the scale of Europe, that get completely ignored and irrelevant at the world scale. So we really need to understand how to work together, create this kind of Airbus moment. Otherwise, nothing's going to really happen in terms of EU ecosystem excellence at the global level. And also a disconnect between the regional strengths and the overarching investment strategies. And now, of course, the elephant in the room, right? The big elephant in the room. This is where AI money goes. If you look at pretty much 43%, if you add San Jose here, so 10, that's like more than 50%. Every dollar invested in startups at the global scale in 2025, out of every dollar, 50 cents go to this tiny place in the world, which is called the Silicon Valley, the Bay Area. And here we see that essentially Europe is really not doing great. And we had the courtesy to put London in orange to make it like, this is Europe. But if you think EU27, we don't look good at all, okay? And that's a major issue. This is the one thing we can talk over and over again about ecosystem of excellence. We can talk about reshaping our R&I system. We can talk about AI factories. We can talk about all of this. This is like a drop in the ocean. The really big issue is that we don't have a financial system that is fit for a world that needs massive investment in startups. Think about the big capex of today. Meta, 400 billion a year. Microsoft, 120 billion a year. Google, 200 billion a year. Now, all of this, NVIDIA was a startup until 1999. Like this big company, what we call the big tech today, they were startups. Startups that benefited from massive investment early on and then basically managed to build capital in-house. And there are three big issues, and Scott Marcus, who is here, is really an evangelist on like trying to fix that issue here. It's essentially that there is money in Europe, but it doesn't flow to the startups that could be the next AI champions. So there is a bottleneck here, so the money doesn't flow. First issue is that behind VC funds in the US, the vast majority is actually pension funds. So pension funds fund the VC that basically fund the startups that becomes the Google and the Meta of the future. Now, we have a huge bottleneck here because we have a different pension system, mainly as a pay-as-you-go model, meaning like the money doesn't flow to the startups. As simple as that. We have a lot of money. please, Scott, tell me if this is a wrong number, but we talked about this number a lot. 9 trillion of assets stuck basically into the small pension fund we have in insurance. So there's a lot of insurance money that could fund also this startup and this ecosystem of excellence. However, we have regulation, we have rule in place that basically prevent that. So we can do something about it. And then private capital has less incentive also because we have a fragmented capital market, so much smaller exits. And all of that to give you the floor back, Andrea.
Oh, I have this. Yeah, I need the other one. Yes. Okay. Thanks. So thanks a lot, Pierre-Alex. I was just quickly also, because we're running out of time, deal with the other aspects, the more policy related. You know, this is a graph that many of you have seen based on the technology stack, is the Eurostack paper. So Martin also even more owns, let's say, this product. It's a publication that CEPS together with Mercator Bertelsmann and UCL produced earlier this year. Europe ended up accumulating a number of dependencies and on foreign players in all layers of the technology stack, so from raw materials all the way to data and AI. And this has led to the proliferation of movements that look at technological sovereignty or potential way to reduce these dependencies. Now, to some extent, many people say, you know, it's going to be very complicated to create a situation where Europe develops, produces everything at home. Perhaps it doesn't make much sense, actually, to develop, produce everything at home. So we've been looking into this aspect of sovereignty, and this echoes also what Aldo was saying before. What does it mean to be sovereign? You mean to have control and ongoing control of what is happening in the operations. It doesn't mean that you have produced and developed everything at home. But there is a big attention towards this topic. And so we've been looking at whether sovereignty is possible and at what conditions and what is a meaningful, let's say, a short, a midterm agenda for the EU in that respect. What we've seen has been an enormous emphasis on compute until now. There's a lot more happening. We will see more happening on talent. We will see more happening on funding specific solutions. For example, the AI and science strategy, the apply AI strategy that is coming up. But so far, a lot of emphasis has been about creating this AI factories, and now in the future, in the next few weeks, the AI gigafactories. So one thing that we did, and we do it in a paper that has been published today. So if you're interested, it's on the CEPS website. You can find it very easily, if you can find the CEPS website, of course, but that's ceps.eu. This paper looks and asks a number of questions. For example, if we need to choose where to put these factories on the territory of the EU, you know, how would you do it? Would you put them alongside also the description of the European Commission in areas where there is an ecosystem of excellence? You know, some of these squares, the bigger squares on EU that Pierre-Alex was showing in the graphs. Or perhaps you want to put this infrastructure, and this is to some extent the logic that is emerging in the US, in areas where the energy costs are low. You might want these factories to talk to each other if you want to create an ecosystem of excellence, right? And so maximize the possibility for scientific communities, business communities to cooperate with each other, and so on and so forth. So we've been testing this hypothesis, trying to go as deeply as possible into this topic. The paper is co-authored with Nicoletta. You see her sitting in the second row. She did a fantastic job into creating some of the visualizations together with Gaia from the data science team that helped us beautify them, that you see now at the bottom right of the screen in a few seconds. So what we find there is the size and the speed of investment, of course, doesn't match the size and speed of investment of other global players. We find that the factories are not at the moment located where the leading EU AI hubs are. And again, this is not necessarily a problem. But we also find that the factories are not located when there's more skills demand. So this might seems to be suggesting that the EU is not looking for places to build infrastructure in the places where the ecosystem would flourish, which is not a problem because you can access this infrastructure remotely as well. But then we also find that the factories are not necessarily located where the energy costs are most competitive. So you see some of these graphs, okay, they're too small. If you can read them at the bottom of the room, you have superpowers. But basically, these graphs that we've prepared tell us where the excellence is and where the hubs is. And if you can see this graph about energy costs, you can see basically that There's very, no, yeah, sorry. Let me see. No, there's energy costs that basically EU AI factories, only the ones that are basically located in Scandinavia, that they can compete with the cost and the energy costs of other leading AI factories in other parts of the world and significantly in the United States and in China. And then again, without going through all this, we map whether the AI factories cooperate with each other. So the places, the regions where AI factories are located. You see this at the right end of this. So the one on the right, you see very limited matching there. We see a lot more between the AI hubs. And again, even insufficiently compared to other parts of the world. Then we map whether factories and hubs talk to each other and collaborate with each other. We also don't find a lot of that. So there is a need to create that texture, that ecosystem, and also to recognize that there is a lot more than compute, as Aldo was saying, to create an ecosystem of excellence. So we have started to look at other things, and there's one thing that I want to mention here, because if you look at the compute that is being installed in all the AI factories and in the future gigafactories, just like in the UK as well, as you saw Jensen Huang recently there, in South Korea and many other parts of the world, you realize that all these factories basically are going to run on NVIDIA GPUs, right? There's only one, which is in Finland, the Lumi AI factory that runs on AMD, which is also partly a problem because the architecture that AMD uses is partly not fully interoperable with the NVIDIA one. So, but NVIDIA is not just an engine. NVIDIA also has lots of lines of software on top. So this is one thing that I would like to raise here. Actually, would show even more of a zoom in into the NVIDIA tech stack in the software layers. You see that there is one element here, which is basically the equivalent of the operating system, like the orchestration layer for any application that is built on top of these engines that is proprietary. And it is supporting open source applications, but it's largely incompatible with many of the other applications and orchestration software that exist that could potentially power AI factories. So the question that we ask is the EU sure that when it makes an investment on one technology, GPUs provided by one player only, and why is Jensen Huang touring the world? So I don't know. All the popularity he gained with PLX, he's probably going to lose after he sees what I'm talking about here. The impression that I have is not potentially a big problem if GPUs remain the dominant way of developing and deploying next generation AI. That we use the cutting edge technology here, that is GPUs. It's not a problem, especially if we only use the engine and not the software layers on top. But if this is going to be constraining on the type of applications that we're going to use in the future, and that this is proprietary so that some of the other players cannot find their space in this environment, or that NVIDIA controls or captures partly the value that is produced through these AI factories, then I think we might be replacing a dependency, so the dependency we have on compute in other parts of the world with another dependency on one player and one technology. So the question that we ask in this paper is, what if NVIDIA loses the game? Oh, it seems impossible because it reached $5 trillion market valuation, right? But what if it loses the game? For example, AMD has a more open architecture than NVIDIA, so perhaps it's more compatible with what the EU wants to achieve there. The Chinese GPUs, you saw the Chinese government recently discouraging Chinese companies from buying NVIDIA GPUs, which signals that they might be catching up in terms of quality, at least the Huawei Ascend GPUs, but also others that are being produced. Second layer is, what if GPUs themselves are outcompeted? What if the future of AI is not with graphics processing units, but is perhaps with tensor processing units or with CPUs, the traditional workhorses of computing processing units, and that use, and this is very much the Chinese approach, a more open international standard called RISC-V that is apparently catching up quite quickly with this. So what if this is not, well, what if we are investing in one technological approach, which is not the one that will power the future. What if generative AI is actually outcompeted? And so we're going, in outer circles, and it's actually other approaches, including some of the approaches. I remember a discussion with Holger that we have, where Europe has been traditionally a leader, and perhaps in particular in robotics and in physical AI, as Pierre-Alex called it at the beginning of this presentation. What if these approaches become viable and the EU has stopped investing in them? And finally, what if in the evolution of processing chips, as we start seeing, the need to offload computing capacity to memory becomes so essential that memory chips become just as important as the PUs, the processing units, and gradually we bring the memory in the processing. I mean, we're looking at the future of computing, and well, we discovered there that there's other players, and the EU is not there, that actually dominate the market for memory chips, and these are Japan and South Korea, with China catching up. So this is neurosymbolic. I mean, but perhaps Holger will certainly, I don't know if you have actually been involved in eBrains, in the neuromorphic computing flagship, which is the follow-up to the human genome, the human brain project. Here, the EU traditionally has been leading. A year ago, more or less, the EU presented a neuromorphic computer with 150 million chips. The Chinese this summer presented a neuromorphic computer with 150 million neurons. Yeah, a neuromorphic computer with 2 billion neurons. And it seems that we're slowing down on an investment of something that actually might pay off the moment in which we bring AI to the robotics world and to the physical world. So to wrap up, can Europe make it? And sorry for rushing through all this content. The scale of investment is very different, but Europe has talent and knowledge and a large single market that it should be fully developed and fully harnessed in terms of the points of contact, the collaborations that could be triggered, and also collaborations between Europe and the rest of the world that is somehow like-minded, right? But we need to map the excellence, the dependencies, the vulnerabilities, and the alternatives. We start doing this also with the data that is on AI World. We'll continue doing this also for the European Commission over the coming weeks and months. We need to go from MAGA or from mega to BABE, if possible. So from make Europe great again to buy American and meanwhile build European, or even buy Chinese, but meanwhile build European. But with build Chinese, the acronym sounded very badly, so BCB. So we need to focus on open source solutions to minimize dependencies, also impose on players like NVIDIA to open up their software layers so that we can still have all the options and all the choices available, retrain and attract talent, avoid fragmentation, but focusing on our excellence hubs and the links between them. And the links between those ones and the other excellence hubs that we can reach out to in the rest of the world. We will need, we talk about it in the panel now, mission-oriented initiatives to deepen AI uptake in specific industry verticals. And this requires even more understanding the specializations that are there, the skills that are needed, the types of software, hardware solutions that will be needed. And finally, yes, try to expand and use the EU approach to AI and the related technology stack as a way to create international partnerships, because no matter how big the single market is, Europe is not going to be able to establish standards in this field if it doesn't team up with other partners around the world. And to some extent, the international digital strategy of the EU that was presented in this room in June tries to go in that direction. I think we wrap up here. You have a nice QR codes and stuff there if you want to continue navigating through the data. Pierre-Alex, thank you very much. And we move now to the panel, but I thank you very much for your attention. All right, so far, so good. Hopefully you're not overwhelmed with information for now. And we want to start discussing these things with a very distinguished group of speakers. I'm going to call them on stage. We have Holger Hoos. I mentioned him already a few times. Please, Holger, come and take your seat here. You have a first mover advantage, so you can also choose a different chair if you want. I indicated one. We have Martin. So Holger, okay, sorry, I need to introduce you. Is the Alexander von Humboldt Professor of AI at Aachen University and Professor of Machine Learning at Universiteit Leiden and Adjunct Professor of Computer Science at the University of British Columbia. We also have Martin Hollin. I also mentioned Martin. Please come and take your seat. Director of Digitalization and the Common Good Program at the Bertelsmann Stiftung. Again, a leading voice on the Eurostack and the European Technology Resilience and Sovereignty. We have Bart Grothaus, and pardon me if I certainly mispronounce your family name. I try to do the best. The director was a member of the European Parliament, and as I had the chance to experience myself in my conversations with him, extremely knowledgeable in this field. We have Marta Trivala, who was a lead AI and cybersecurity policy at and EU government affairs at SAP. And Gaspard Demure, Deputy Head of Unit for AI Innovation and Policy Coordination at the European Commission. And last but not least, Michael Schönstein, and the Head of Digital Policy at the German Federal Chancellery. All right, so basically what I will do in the order in which I called you, try to get a statement from you on what you've heard so far, and what if you have one, bold idea on what should be done in order to move in the direction of creating a true ecosystem of excellence at the EU level. As people can see, we don't have a lot of time for this panel, but we have a lot of speakers. So I'm trying to extract a lot of, and they're all very good. So it's not that I can say, okay, Michael, please speak less because you're not as good as the others. Okay, that would be very mean, by the way, and it's not true, obviously. That's why I picked Michael. So, Holger, can I start with you? Give you 2-3 minutes for you to give a sense of whether you more or less broadly agree with what you've seen and what you think is to be done urgently at the EU level to move in the direction of the European ecosystem of excellence. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Lots of interesting stuff, food for thought. I've been thinking about what we should be doing since about 2017, shortly after I came back from Canada, 20 years in Canada, to the EU. And I'm first of all delighted that finally we're at the point where we see the level of investment, at least on the public side, that I think needs to be there in order to ensure competitiveness, right? So that's a good thing. I'm also delighted to see, to hear Aldo talk about cooperation between the UK and the EU, the rest of the EU. I think that's an absolutely essential thing. We've been saying this for years. After Brexit, things became a little bit more difficult, but I think they're now becoming easier, and that's very important for all of us. And it's not just the UK, it's also, Norway, Switzerland, other associated countries. So that's also very good. I do see a move towards defragmentation. The gigafactories can be understood in that context. I think that's also good. And I still see a lack of ambition when it comes to doing something that I would say passes the New York Times test, right? Something that is announced by the European Commission, by the member states. And the moment it's announced, over there in the United States, the phones start ringing and people say, wow, that's a huge thing. I think the AI Act was a little bit of a move in that direction for sure, but that's not something that really makes us competitive. That's something that keeps us safe and allows us to move in a reasonable direction for sure. I think we need that sort of a moment on the investment side. And I'm afraid that gigafactories, although they get closer to this, are still not it. And I think what it should be, especially seeing those graphs about, our falling off in the open source era, right? Which I think would be a very, very important one to invest also in terms of what you were talking about, Aldo, right? I think the idea of a CERN for AI is still an extremely good one. And that would have the phones ringing. That would make the front page of the New York Times, I believe. I don't know what's happening there because Ursula von der Leyen has been talking about something like that, but it seems to be difficult to get the member states together on it. I think what we need to do is create an agency, very much like ESA, whose job it is to deal with AI and let them run with it, right? And then if they want a distributed implementation of that, that's fine. If they want a centralized thing, that's fine as well. But give this to a group of people who run it and take full responsibility as they do in space.
Thanks a lot. Perfect. Holger, I move to Martin.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll try to build on the points of Holger and Aldo. And I think one thing that struck me, I think we've understood the why. I think we are struggling to figure out the how. And one kind of trap that I see us falling in is trying to replicate this innovation paradigm that we grew up with from Silicon Valley, right? And a little bit of a lack of creativity and courage to maybe rethink it a little bit differently. I know that's easier said than done, but I think a lot of the discussion currently that I'm observing, not here, but in general, is about how do we get more strategic options, right? Reducing lock-in effects, how can we have more kind of opportunities to also select alternatives. But I really would love to have the debate go further towards where can Europe make itself kind of indispensable? Be it with our data wealth, be it with, a superpower that we develop on the whole notion of interoperability of these systems, because the world will remain extremely fragmented. And we are a very interesting laboratory when it comes to these things, but we haven't really weaponized it or marketed it the right way. So I think that's something worth discussing. We need to bridge fragmentation in this context. So maybe one shout out also to what will happen in the mid of November concerning the Digital Sovereignty Summit in Berlin. We will also, together with SEPS, then also announce a European think tank network around exactly these notions to at least get kind of a knowledge engine running in this context. And I think it's a first step with British partners, with Ukrainian partners, so it's also not just the Union. And the last point I wanted to make is also to underline my sincere belief that the data governance ecosystem is one of the DNA layers that needs utmost attention, especially once we go towards things like attribution-based control, the question of infrastructure-based kind of access to some of the data treasures that we are on, because again, all of the LLMs of the world were trained on a millionth of the available data in a very crude, scraped way, and I think there's a real opportunity here for Europe in the next 2 or 3 years to leapfrog. But only if we get our act together and also, approach this as this whole open source kind of paradigm of sharing with each other. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Martin. We go to Bart.
Thanks. I think that what struck me most in the previous presentation from you was the NVIDIA slide, how much we are dependent on NVIDIA. It's just incredible. And the build American, buy American, build European. I want to show how problematic that is, and not with Donald Trump. I want to show how problematic that is because of Joe Biden. In his last week in office, he put forward the AI Diffusion Act. And he said, all those, you saw the map of Europe, those Eastern Europe will become 2-tier trade partners of Europe. You will not get those NVIDIA chips. That's a problem in itself. Of course, Trump reversed it, but you've seen the news today, as he will, the news, that was about B20 and H200 chips. The newest Blackwell chips of NVIDIA will not be exported to Europe at all. So that's a very, very difficult strategy to follow as Europe for me, because we're being colonized by our great ally, right? We're being digitally colonized. Our lives are being digitally colonized. We have no other option than to revise the CHIPS Act that we have, and the CHIPS Act 2.0, at its core, for the longer term, must be design and advanced AI manufacturing chips inside of Europe. That can only be done if you create demand. Demand politics is, across the globe, the trend, the global trend of this moment. You can create demand. TSMC or others can come here if you decide to legislate a European cloud. If you say, we want European-built chips inside our cloud. That is how you legislate and create demand. It must happen. If you do not do that, we lose everything else that we spoke about. So that's the alpha of the omega. That's what I want to say. There's another country which is in dire straits. That's China. Doesn't get any NVIDIA chips too. Huawei's Ascend chips has already been mentioned. But they do something very clever, the Chinese. We must commend them for that. They use open source and they do it so well. And we can learn from that. And using open source also means that the CAC, the Cyber Administration of China, keeps a track on what everyone does. It's not like the US, all 20 companies or 200 companies go for generative AI in stovepipes, and everyone builds their own infrastructure, 365 billion, etc. Duplications across, enormous amounts of investments, enormous amounts of energy consumption that it requires. That's not the European way. We should do it more like the open source Chinese way, saying, okay, you have a vertical integrated industry. We want European sovereign controls there. This is how we build it. And this is the option that Europe should go for, I believe, in the CADA, the Cloud AI and Development Act, which will be put forward, I hope, as soon as possible, which should have be done already. But not to keep it this long, we should become more sovereign to start at the core, and then the rest will follow.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bart. Certainly will be a discussion about this in the Q&A. Marta, over to you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for having me. Very quickly, SAP is a German cloud and software company with AI embedded capabilities in this cloud, just to make sure that we are on the same page and you know where I'm coming from. And to jump directly to the topic of the panel, Europe's industrial policy and strategic advantage. I have 3 points for this topic. First of all, I would like to take a step back on what actually is Europe's advantage. First, Europe's advantage, it's the single market. This is something that can give us competitiveness. And we can make our unicorns, our startups, our big companies as well, shine and scale up. However, we see plenty of gaps in the single market. The single market hasn't been achieved yet. You mentioned the lack of up and running capital markets union, so it's difficult to invest in Europe, but also when it comes to regulations and enforcement of regulations, we see plenty of gold plating by the member states when it comes to implementing the rules, sometimes limited enforcement, which makes the laws a bit toothless, so they are not harmonized. Different authorities, different interpretations of the laws. It's very difficult for companies to operate in this kind of environment. So I am very cautious with creating another agency on the top. I would rather say let's harmonize what we have. Let's try to work together. And to give you a very specific example, also on the regulatory side, what is an obstacle? The AI Act. Even though we are very much in favor of the principles of the AI Act, and obviously we prefer one AI Act than 27 different AI Acts, we also see in the discussions with our customers that they are simply afraid in adopting AI because they don't know what they will be responsible for when it comes to AI solutions. They don't understand it. The act is still unclear, it's not finished, and the companies are not incentivized to develop new solutions because they are afraid of falling to high risk to comply with other level of requirements or create models because they will need to comply with another layer of requirements. So here, one point, strengthening and harmonizing the single market and also creating innovation-friendly regulations that, of course, take into account the risks. The second point, a separate focus area on business AI, which is distinct from consumer AI. We are obviously, as SAP, we operate in the first area, business AI. We see that both categories are very often mixed up, also in the regulation, in the understanding of policymakers in the Brussels bubble, but they are completely different. Business AI is fundamentally oriented on enterprises, and the nature of this relationship is completely different. They are contractually organized, and we are talking about the actors that understand the technology, they understand the risk, and they have specific requirements when it comes to security, when it comes to operational resilience. They work on structured, anonymized, and operational data sets. So this needs to be respected. It's completely different from the consumer applications and consumer AI. And this is not understood also in the regulation. And the third one, pragmatic innovation, being excellent when it comes to the application of AI. And this is something that SAP especially can play a role. We see the first value of AI, because if we treat AI as a low-hanging fruit, something that should be deployed very quickly to provide advantage for the EU, it's AI applications. AI applications in different verticals, as you mentioned, Andrea, on one of the slides before, in different sectors. Something that we will be able to deploy very quickly, reply to specific business challenges, and in this way we can adapt existing AI models through creating smaller foundation models to reply to specific challenges, as the speaker at the beginning mentioned when it comes to healthcare industry. This is also something on which SAP is working on. Sectorial foundation models and semantic tools that can make the models interoperational, for example, knowledge graphs. So this is something for us where Europe can play advantage with the data we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta. And I think this is a good bridge towards Gaspar, because indeed there's a missing piece here, right? There's something that is just been presented that is about to happen, and I think will be potentially the game changer in all this if it's successful, which we all hope, of course, which is the Apply AI strategy. And so maybe it gives an answer not to all the concerns that have been raised, but to some of them. What do you think, Gaspar?
Well, I mean, indeed, and I'll come to the Apply AI strategy. Maybe a quick feedback on the key elements that were discussed on, the different blocks for sovereignty. We have a full alignment with what was said. I mean, we are not focusing only on, the infrastructure. We will build the gigafactories. We are building the AI factories, and that's great. That's needed. But we are also working very much on data, increasing the pool of data to make sure that we have the capacity to train the model with the data at European level. We are working on skills. We are working on the legal dimension. And yes, it's not yet the CERN of AI, but we've created the AI office. It's a start. So we are working really in that direction of bringing the different blocks together. Now, when it comes to what Europe has, specifically as a strength, we really think that this is the integration of AI into the different sectors, and that's the Apply AI strategy. It comes from the Draghi report reflection, this idea that we should take, benefit of this very strong industrial kind of capacity we have. We have 10 sectors in the Apply AI strategy, including the public sector, and we want to do for each of these sectors what the first speaker was mentioning, this foundational AI model for health. This is something that we announced in the Apply AI strategy. We will do the same for manufacturing, for robotics, for defense, for mobility, you name it. The idea is really to use the AI factories and gigafactories, use the data space, provide computing time to the research community and to the industry to team up, work together on foundational model applied to the needs of the specific sectors. We think that this is a very strong element of the European dimension, and we will push that forward very much. Now, we also have the legislative dimension. You were mentioning the Cloud and AI Development Act, and of course, it's great to be able to discuss with you today on the concept of sovereignty, because we will kind of develop the concept of sovereignty at all the level of the stack. I mean, of course, it's easier in a way to define what is a sovereign cloud, but we are also thinking about defining what is a sovereign model or a sovereign system. And there we are thinking about, developing this concept all over the vertical. So thanks a lot, and happy to continue the discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Gaspar. I'm sure there will be questions for you when it comes to the Q&A. Michael, I'm going to give you the mic. Yeah.
Thank you.
From Commission to Member States, 18th of November, Germany and France convene this meeting also to talk about technological sovereignty, among other things. What's your take on Europe's positioning and chances to achieve competitiveness in AI over the coming months, years?
Yeah, I'm optimistic actually, because, well, first of all, we have to be, right? But second, I also think from what we heard, we see capacity is here, we can build on something. What I think I'd like to stress, I tried jotting this down as I was hearing the presentations, is really that I think the first point we need to keep in mind when we talk about the technologies here at play, especially artificial intelligence, is that they are fit for purpose, and that requires that we have an idea of what that purpose is. So rather than fostering AI, we should think what are the problems we really need to solve, and then look for the technology, the method of AI, or the specific application of a method of AI that then fits to that problem. Of course, where there are capacities that are, let's say, relatively resilient against different developments in the future, so where you have sort of no regret interventions, those are the ones to go for. But I think it really needs to start to think about what are the issues that we have to solve here that are very different. And the European technology stack is fundamentally different from the US-American technology stack, and is fundamentally different from the Chinese technology stack. I think we shouldn't forget that. If you look at current R&D expenditures and current R&D expenditure planning in the private sector, you see that the divergence of technology stacks is actually going to increase and not decrease in the future. So that makes a lot of sense when you think about basic technologies that you lay across your technology stack, such as artificial intelligence and its different applications, that you have something that actually fits to our own European technology stack. And sometimes technologies from elsewhere may fit, sometimes they may not. So we definitely need capacities to develop our own. But as I say in the very beginning, stands a reminder, think about what problem you want to solve. This is the first. Is it demographic change? Is it climate resilience? Whatever it may be. I think the second point I want to make is that in doing so, we all, the Commission, the member states, but also the private sector, we need to become much faster and more nimble in the way we go about things. So we have this tendency, especially in the public sector, to commit to large and shiny projects that usually take large and shiny sums of money for large and shiny amounts of time. I would put in question if, committing X billion euros today for the next 5 to 7 years, independent of what we're doing, is actually the right way to go, because I think we need very clear ideas, and here I go back to the fit for purpose, about the problems we want to solve and the milestones that get us there. And if something works, we have to double down. And if it doesn't work, we have to end it. And that especially, I think, is really, really important going forward. This goes for subsidies, this goes for any kind of financial incentives, this also goes for regulation. Be clear on the objective, make it measurable, and if it works, follow down. And if it doesn't, we learn how to end programs and regulations or adapt. And third, I think it's also important that we come forward-looking. And I really like, Holger, what you said earlier. I think looking beyond, if I can paraphrase this, also in reference to the presentations we've heard, looking maybe beyond the transformer architecture and looking at what is a post-transformer paradigm for, be it foundation models that are based on something else, be it a completely different AI that maybe we can't or don't want to imagine right now, but where is the space for Europe to develop there? How can we leapfrog? I think this is actually really, really important. We're very often talking about AI methods and technologies in a way that sounds a lot like catching up. I'm not sure catching up is the right strategy or strategic choice. Again, be fit for purpose, be nimble, don't try to catch up, do your own thing. That's the third point then. And finally, I think we've heard that just now, we have to get much better at federating what we have. So yeah, this is really, whether it's a centralized option or not, but I really think that if you look at the mapping that different players, I know CEPS had a big role, Bertelsmann had a big role in mapping the Eurostack, the nice picture you showed, yeah, did. This is really helpful, but map against that all the initiatives at the member state level and at the Commission level. I would claim, not sure it's entirely true, but I would claim there's multiple ones at each of the layers that are going on right now. Again, which of them work? Measured against their own objectives. Which of them work because they're fit for purpose? How can we federate those that work together instead of starting the next and the next and the next one? How can we double down on convergence of what works? I think these would be my 4 points.
Thank you very much. So I will ask everybody maybe to give a first round of applause to our speakers who actually gave us a lot of food for thought. I have tons of questions. I know that we have a Q&A scheduled in a few minutes, but just want to get a sense of how many questions will there be in the room. Is 1, 2, 3? I don't believe that. There's a lot of people that I know that I want to ask a question. 4, oh, they're very timid. Okay, and okay, so let me. So the others will not get a chance. Right? So let me. No, at least I will give them a priority as we collect questions right now. I just want to get a sense of a couple of things. So first of all, I agree with with the catching up idea. I just want to see whether all the other speakers have an opinion about this. Meaning, is Europe trying to emulate with less resources and a big time lag a model that is about to come to a cliff? That's the most, let's say, dystopian way of putting it, if you want. Meaning the transformer model is, the US squeezing out everything it can, investing a lot of resources, pumping up a lot of sort of big public-private effort. I mean, in what we call the US government plus the big tech giants approach, which many call a hype at this moment, right? Is Europe really emulating that, or is it in the European strategy nested in it the germ, the embryo of a different approach that is more, let's say, wary of how we use resources, data, and energy in particular? Holger, you want to say something about this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I do think that transformer models, they're not at their end yet. I don't believe in the scaling hypothesis that we scale them all the way to AGI, and I think it would be tragic if we succeeded, because we're not ready for that. But I do think that there is some room to go and that they're incredibly useful. So I think we simply cannot afford to say we're going to wait or just use American and Chinese models. And actually, the Chinese have shown us how much you can still squeeze out of that, right? I mean, bloody heck, we in Europe should be able to do at least as well in terms of, making better models with less data and a little bit more sustainable, right? Actually, we've already shown with AI factories, for instance, the Jupyter AI factory, that we can build big computational infrastructures that, although the energy is a little bit more expensive there, are much more energy efficient, right? And that's the way to go. Secondly, what I would say is, and Michael, you shone a good light on this, is of course, there's much more to AI than just transformer models and where we can take them next, right? And that's really important to see. Marta, you said this as well, right? You said that, in the B2B context, it's different. And I fully agree. And there is a technology where we in Europe are world leading called process mining that in B2B is incredibly important. And in consumer is probably going to be not important ever at all. But it's a technology that can be super useful. It's one example of a European technology that's right there, that is being commercialized on grand scale, right? But we can still be much more effective in this, right? So we need to think this broadly while not giving up on the ambition to also compete where currently the action is. And bubble or not, I think action will continue to be in that space, and we better be able to sort of hold our own there.
And Holger, can I just, with a yes/no question, provoke you one thing? I remember when we had a conversation several months ago, you also were in our podcast, and you said the current models, Gen AI models that we see, do not tick any of the boxes of trustworthy AI, as we call it in Europe. You're still the same opinion?
Absolutely. And in particular, I think what we want is AI that's safe, dependable, and sustainable, and there are none of that.
Aldo, you agree, since you're still here? Okay, very good. So it's already 2 and 3 actually with me. But and let's see if the others agree. Gaspar, do you have a sense of what is the perceptions at the Commission or your perception?
Well, I mean, the discussion is very much related to the gigafactories. I mean, are they too small or are they too big, too much of a wasted investment? I mean, this replies to the question. We still believe that we need to be competitive on these type of models. We think that 100,000 GPUs is the right level because it will oblige us also to innovate in terms of energy efficiency and condensation of the model. So that's the answer that we are giving to this question. But at the same time, we also want to innovate into the next generation models, notably by replying to specific needs, to specific questions on also the industrial side.
All right, so because we look at the compute capacity, and of course 100,000, so it's a deliberate choice not to go beyond.
Well, it's a matter of also of capacity of investments. We do not have the capacity of the hyperscalers in Europe in terms of public money, let's face it. But we think that with that ratio, we have a serious investment at the same time, provoking in a way innovation in the way we are building the models.
Yeah. Yeah, because some people might have noticed, for example, the announcement by Meta that aims to have 1.3 million GPUs installed by the end of this year, right? And the 5 gigafactories altogether should have around 500,000. And the current 13 AI factories that are in place designated already with the without counting the 6 new ones that have just been announced, we're talking about 57,000 GPUs altogether. So we're talking about a completely different scale. My question, also maybe looking at Bart, I don't know if Marta has an opinion about this, is there a way for us to invest in a way that is future-proof? Meaning, once this investment has taken place, Bart, you were mentioning the new NVIDIA GPUs, right? Yeah, Blackwells. What about the next generation? Meaning, are we investing in something that is a one-off, whereas on the other hand, there will be continuous renewal? How do we stay on, on the cutting edge?
In each promising quantum computer company in the world, NVIDIA has taken a huge stake in the past couple of months. Hardly unnoticed, but NVIDIA is counting its bets, betting on 2 horses. Whether they succeed improving their own chips or the quantum computer, photonics, succeed, they don't care. They're in it either way. Where is Europe? That's my thing. The innovation is here. The photonics innovation, the quantum innovation, it will come from Europe. The question is, will we monetize it? Same like Professor Holk. I agree, Professor Holk, what you said. I agree with all you said. And they are not according to our values. But the question is not whether it's according to our values. Will we use it? Will they win? We will not. We will use it, and they will win. And I'm looking for a strategy that we will win inside our domain. We have to be sovereign, also for democratic values. If you see how elections are being held, if you see what kind of information is being pushed by AI models, we have to have some form of regulation there. And just look at. I mean, if there's anything I could recommend you when you go home, listen. If you master the German language, I'm Dutch, so I do. It's a form of German language. Don't say it to my compatriots, but it is. There's a great podcast on Peter Thiel, their Peter Thiel story. Listen to it. Just listen on how regulation, how it thrives him to push us, and how it will thrive him and J.D. Vance to start pushing us on our military requirements we have from the US to keep us secure. They will back out of NATO if we regulate their AI. We are being colonized, and you should acknowledge it. I have children, and if I have breakfast with them, I acknowledge that at least 50% of the breakfast is digital, because they have that phone, and it's so it's that part of their world is being colonized, and we should have a much bolder strategy than just saying we want values. We need to win. This is what I miss. I miss a strategy of putting down small modular reactors of let's say 50 or 60 of a kind throughout Europe to build data centers. I haven't seen any proposal of the Commission yet. We do need computing power for that, and of course we need the CHIPS Act. Of course we need the basics, and we need to have scalable. Sorry, I disagree with what you said. We need to scale in Europe, otherwise we cannot compete. And this is something I miss at the European level.
Marta, you wanted to react to this, and then Martin, so you also wanted to.
When it comes to investment, maybe I can quote my CEO, Christian Klein, who was somehow critical towards the EU AI Gigafactories project, saying code over concrete. And why? Because with investment in Europe, we need to be smart about it. Obviously, it's good to invest in infrastructure. However, it's also important how we operationalize the AI lifecycle. So it's not only about cutting-edge algorithms and creating new models. It's also about using them. It's also about cybersecurity. It's also about people who work on them. It's about secure data handling, model monitoring, compliance mechanisms, and so on. It's plenty of other things that should go together to make these investments generate expected returns in the future. That's why we still believe that this project is very interesting. However, we gave our feedback to the European Commission how we see it should be realized. And when it comes to AI agents and how we can build applications that are really well used in the specific verticals, Andrej Karpathy, I think 2 weeks ago, said in a podcast that it's not a year of agents, it's a decade of agents. There's plenty to do in this respect, and we can still do plenty to make these agents better, to make these agents more efficient. And skills and professionals. Andrej Karpathy, whom just quoted, he's Slovak, but he moved to Canada So we need to look into this to attract talent.
Thank you very much, Marta. Martin.
Ooh, how to build on that? One quick observation that I think we really need to kind of, encourage ourselves to dare. This is not binary. It's not an either or. It really is, a transitory speed almost of, Europe at 2 speeds, in that sense where we need to cooperate where currently it still seemed to be possible across the stack, but we need to start substituting when necessary to actually safeguard this European way of life that you're mentioning, but also without falling the traps of trying to catch up and being part of a race that has been already set up in a way that you cannot win. And I think this is something that requires lots of boldness and evidence, but at a different approach of speed, I think that is there. And again, really just encouraging ourselves to think like, as Michael was saying, right? What is our USP? Is it really, that we need to be first to market to something? Or is it more this meta notion of being first to be trusted in a world that will be minted by uncertainty for generations to come? Who will be the providers of trusted infrastructure? 2 players that neither want to choose the American or the Chinese model. What are the market opportunities opening up there? And what is, even the protocol layer level of, basic infrastructure and also building blocks of this kind of transformation that we can be part of the providers? And to make the last point, we cannot do this alone as Europe either. So where are the Canadians? Where are the cooperation mechanisms, with global majority countries? That's what our, gateway should be focusing on with exactly this notion. What is the big narrative? Is it the trust angle? I mean, there's a wonderful digital trust convention at Mila, in Canada today, with lots of our friends being there, talking about this stack and also being inspired by this mental model. But again, just throwing this out there, let's be bold, because my son's 9, similar story. I want him to grow up in a democracy, and I don't think that we'll catch up in order to protect it. We need to propose something else that captures hearts and minds and makes people a lot of money, and at the end of the day, that's it.
Gaspar, I'm going to get to you in a second. So basically what we are seeing is that we need solutions that meet both the New York Times homepage, the front page of Holger, but at the same time, the usefulness and purpose orientation of Michael. So one thing that I add to this, just as a tiny provocation, forgive me for this, Gaspar, because what we discover, and also Bart was mentioning that, OpenAI is diversifying, right? In order not to be too dependent on NVIDIA, they also invested basically in a stake in AMD. The Chinese are diversifying. You see them leading in neuromorphic, in neurosymbolic approaches, in transformer models with less resources and so on. Is Europe also diversifying, or you go all in?
So we're entering the provocative part. I mean, and so I listen that we need to be bold, we need to be encompassing, we need to also have focus in the gigafactories, but at the same time. So I've been working in the European Commission for more than 17 years, and I think the best way to kill an industrial policy is to try to make it perfect. So I've never seen actually the Commission being so active, on industrial policy than over the last 3 years. I mean, sectorial policy, 10 years ago, it was almost impossible to speak about sectors, about verticals. We have that. Gigafactories, it's direct investment. It's a lot of intervention on the market. So yes, it's a very active policy. I think we should take that momentum and also be positive about these developments.
Thank you very much, Gaspar. Indeed, we recognize that, and that's, as a think tank, as an independent think tank, we try to make, to do everything we can to feed into these policies, to provide evidence and data, because we know it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity. I mean, if you invest badly in this industrial policy, it's, of course, going to be very complicated for the EU to recover any trace of competitiveness or the ability to have a say, right, in the shaping of this ecosystem. Michael, what do you expect from the November 18, crystal ball? What do you think is going to happen?
I mean, I won't reveal all the things, because my boss wants to do that. So, but what I do think, first of all, this is France and Germany together really pushing for something here, and I think that in itself, gives a signal, which I think is the single most important headline here, and I think we still in the background are tiptoeing around the fact that you can hardly have efficiency and resilience at the same time. Or in other words, especially in the private sector, but also in public investment decisions, we're beginning very slowly to realize that resilience has a price and we need to price it very accurately. I think in that it's important to make clear that there's a political commitment to the issue. I think what's also important, and that's also something that I think should be clear, is that this is a summit on European digital sovereignty. Yes, digital sovereignty doesn't mean autarky. We place ourselves very firmly in an interconnected web of interdependencies, because the United States don't have full control over their technology stack either, nor does China at this point. So I think those it would be illusionary to posit otherwise. The distributions may be different, and depending what we measure how, always the picture looks different, but definitely it's not the case that anyone right now is completely autark in its design, development and deployment of digital technologies. So that's perhaps also the second thing. And nevertheless, I think it's important to have this commitment there that needs to be clear. We're hoping for, I think, an alignment of the regulatory framework of procurement and of investment decisions, both public and private, in the direction that I would say between these polar opposites of efficiency and resilience perhaps tilt a little bit further in the direction of resilience. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And indeed, earlier this year in June, Henna Virkkunen came to talk about tech sovereignty and the Eurostack. Martin was there, and she mentioned procurement as one of the first elements in the agenda. So I would expect something on public procurement to happen on November 18. I have one provocation, and then I open the floor. I'm not going to seek any answer. Just say it out loud, and I start running. But indeed, the US, as you say, Michael, doesn't have full control of its technology stack either, right? And they depend, especially if they don't want to deal with China, they depend on Europe in at least 2 layers, not necessarily all big, of the technology stack. One is the ASML lithography, so absolutely essential, almost 100% market share in this very tiny layer, but super important layer in semiconductors. And the second is in 5G connectivity, right? Where, apart from the Koreans, if you don't want to deal with the Chinese, the US is basically nowhere in terms of patents and solutions. So the problem is that we don't, and there's more indeed, if you think about them, but we don't present ourselves at the negotiation table by saying we're not going to give you those, because that's not the way in which the EU negotiates trade deals, and there's not the type of mandate that EU negotiators have when they get there. And there's something very good, very positive in the fact that the President of the European Commission cannot set and commit or not commit or threaten or blackmail on behalf of the private sector. But unfortunately, this is what we face on the other side. I was wondering whether we should be doing something about this, or whether we should be adopting, meaning being able to be more transactional in trade deals, not that we merge public and private, but be more transactional or not. So I know that Bart wants to react to that. Okay, we take questions from the audience. Who were the 4? One here. We're going to pass on the microphones. I'm going to steal one here. I don't know if there's... Okay, I'm going to ask you to help me there. Can you please, even if I know who you are, but introduce yourself to the speakers and ask a question.
Sure. My name is Roberto. I wanted to ask about, on the topic of interoperability modularity as a route to competitiveness, a question about the space between the blocks in the AI stack, the protocols that connect data to training to compute to implementation. Andrea already mentioned in the NVIDIA example that a brittle connection between these steps can make space for a walled garden or make space for control from other entities. This seems to me to be a key case of software dictating hardware, meaning it's a very fast-moving space and it's a path that has to be chosen now, not in the next years, but in the next months. My question is, should Europe be working to safeguard the flexibility of these spaces if it wants to implement interoperability, federation, or modularity as a route to competitiveness?
Thank you very much, Roberto. In recent conversations that I had in the community, particularly in the open source community, the message that resonated is CUDA, which is the layer that I showed, the new MS-DOS. So because people have been like me early on in the Microsoft case, or in the early days of personal computing, remember how Microsoft discovered that indeed, and IBM actually failed to realize that the most important layer in that ecosystem was actually the operating system, because it's a platform for applications. And on top of that, they built their successful story that actually ended up cannibalizing and prevailing over the hardware part, which IBM could be replaced with other forms of processors or other types of hardware. So are we about to witness that era, that shift? And is there something that the European Commission should do about this? It's also something that we address in the paper that was published today. You had a comment, please introduce yourself. And
thank you. Florian Schuck from the European Digital SME Alliance. I would like to hear your views about the trade-offs between focusing on one goal versus spreading one's bets. We already touched upon this. The Gigafactory seemed to be a push towards building foundational models, but we also heard that it's not enough. At the same time, Europe is also not fully embracing narrow industrial AI. So what are your views on where the EU is going with this, and do you think we should change the path towards one, or is it actually good to diversify?
All right, let me see. There were another couple of people that wanted to ask questions. There's you here. Could you pass on the microphone? Let's see how cooperative. Let's see whether our single market in the room can make things happen without barriers. Yeah, over to you. Allocative efficiency. You got the mic.
My name is Shwana from AK Public Affairs. I wanted to touch on the point on the definitions of sovereignty. So most recently we saw the DigiDigit cloud sovereignty framework. I think this was kind of the first time we've seen really precise language on what sovereignty means. So going forward, you mentioned, all levels, we're hoping to get a definition. So does that mean we're going to see one on AI, on cloud and cyber? Is it DigiDigit, connect, trade, different definitions there? Are we seeing a harmonized, so one overall, digital sovereignty definition? Curious to hear maybe from Commission side, but also Germany, since we're having the summit coming up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? I'm going to give you a last chance, because then we will need to. Alessandra, you have a question here. Let me look at the rest of the people in the room. No, we collect your comment, and then we're going to go back to the speakers for a last round.
Yes, Alessandra Chirico again.
Yeah, keep it as close as possible.
Okay. I have one short comment regarding, so here the title being Building Europe Ecosystem Excellence in AI, but then thinking about sovereignty and the internal dimension of sovereignty, my caveat is not to forget the digital divide. So to strengthen, the excellence within European borders in order to be able to face then competition on a global scale. And yes, this caveat. And then I have a question, if I may, regarding the comparison with, or the wish to have European Space Agency like for artificial intelligence. There are ideas going around regarding actually the digital sphere as such, where you have regulatory agencies taking care not only of AI Act, but also Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, and cybersecurity dimension, which is so multifaceted that it is absolutely tricky. I do agree with you. That would be ideal. It would be something very nice to have, but I see so many differences, even with the implementation of AI Act in different countries. You have identification of diversified agencies in the national level taking care of that. So it requires, I think, a very huge effort. Yes, that's my take.
Bart is signaling his intention.
I have to be back in Parliament at 4, so I have 10 minutes to go by.
Okay.
Just one remark as a lawmaker. And I was in 2017, there was a Siemens Alstom decision from DG Comp. DG Comp said, Siemens and Alstom train builders. They said, we can't compete with Chinese builders if you don't let us merge. We have to have more scale up inside Europe. And DG Comp said, no, you cannot merge because you will have market dominance in Europe. That is the biggest, I mean, the biggest competitor we have is this thinking. We have to have companies who can scale up and dominate inside the world market. This is how the Chinese operate, this is how the Americans operate. So leverage your own internal market, like Letta said, and that's why I also agree with what you said in the first question. But let me just say one last thing. I'm a free market, liberal, capitalist, pro-capitalist, business politician. But I do want to say, if we want that, there's another aspect of what you said we should take into account. That's interoperability. If we say to one of the biggest European champions in the future to build a European cloud or a European AI stack, and you have to be interoperable, he will not win. Keep it in mind that we need to introduce a different thinking. The White House invites 5 or 15 different parties and they will say only 2 will win, the rest of you will lose. And we will make sure that we win, and not just win in America, but we will win in the world. This is how they operate. If we decide to keep us small and think small, act small, we will be colonized. That's what my main thesis is. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Bart. I'm sure there will be conversations about this. Thank you very much for coming to visit us, to see us, and contribute to our ideas. It reminds me a little bit of the age, I mean, maybe Brian here in the room might remember the age of regulatory holidays in the Federal Communications Commission many years ago. I think it's 2002, or no, broadband, right? Say, in order to incentivize investment in broadband, we promise that you're not going to have to share your networks, right? Is this the logic that might lead Europe to compete, or is the interoperability logic something that Europe can credibly implement in Europe and also in the rest of the global majority as well? Who wants to? Gaspar is.
Maybe I'll reply to the to the 2
yes,
points.
Go ahead.
One was on SMEs and startups. I mean, of course, AI factories and gigafactories are not the only tool that we have at EU level. You know that we have the European Digital Innovation Hubs. We have more than 250 of them everywhere in Europe. They are specifically there to tackle the issue of how to bring AI to the companies. We will continue to use them full speed, and we will integrate the European Digital Innovation Hubs with the AI factories and gigafactories. So I fully agree with what you said in the beginning. It's about coordinating the different tools that we have. We have many of them at EU and national level. This is essential. On the definition, I mean, this is in the making. Many, places in the European institution are thinking about what it means actually to operationalize sovereignty. So this is ongoing. But of course, it's not just about thinking about sovereign cloud. This is about the full stack. So we are thinking about how to operationalize that if we manage to do so.
Thank you very much, Gaspar. Holger is really 2 fingers, wants to intervene, and then we go to the other speakers.
Yeah, 3 quick comments. The first one on this question, how much we should diversify, right? And here I want to connect to what Bart said. I mean, the question is not should we diversify or not. As I think in Europe, we're naturally good at diversifying. The question is to which extent should we go against that and actually not only diversify, which we're naturally good at, but also intensify a lot. And Bart said, you know, if you think small, you stay small. And I think that's exactly right. And here's an example. The AI factories that have been announced so far, you know, we've heard, what, 57,000 GPUs? 24,000 of these GPUs are operational right now in one site in Germany. Do we see that anybody is willing to say this is a huge success? Jensen Huang is talking about it as one of the reference installations in the world for doing this in an energy efficient way. Do we see anybody saying like, let's build on this. Let's make this a gigafactory right away? Not even in Germany, there is a majority for that. Instead, people are saying, well, maybe we need to distribute it a bit between the German states, and I can see where they're coming from. But this is thinking small, staying small. And the second comment on this is, great to have the gigafactories planned, right? Great to have the AI factories, but what about coordination between them? I saw absolutely nothing so far about a coordinating mechanism. Now, the JIVE proposal, which got pretty good marks and got funded, right? We proposed out of our own volition that we would voluntarily try and facilitate cooperation between the AI factories. That was well received, that's great. But it would be very good to have something like this. And then my final comment goes to your question regarding why an agency. You know, in space, which is a very difficult and a very expensive business, in Europe, we actually have kind of dominance in one area, and that is Earth observation. It's incredibly important, and ESA is world leading on this. Do we really think we would have gotten there if we would have done it on the member state or German state level? Not at all. What's needed there for these kind of big things is basically an organization that has the mandate and then full responsibility and accountability to deliver, right? And that's not about making laws or regulation. This is about teaming up with industry to provide industrial solutions, right? ESA has many industrial contractors to then get the stuff into space and make valuable products and services out of it, which I think ESA is succeeding at very nicely. I think it's not fair to demand of the Commission to do all of this in-house, right? You guys are policymakers, and I think you're probably doing that about as well as anybody could hope for, right? But I do think the people in ESA that make our space program, that couldn't be done within the Commission, and therefore the member states created a separate organization that only has that mandate. And I think AI is important enough to do exactly the same thing. And then the buck stops with them. Then if it doesn't work, we do what you say. We say, hey, you know, this isn't working. Let's kill it. Let's do something different.
Well, what you say, Holger, Gaspar, you want to react to this?
Yeah, just to say that I really do not agree that thinking SMEs is thinking small. Not at all. No, so I really think that we need to have a vibrant startup landscape, and out of that landscape to pick up also the champions of tomorrow. So I really don't buy that formula. And I also think that by combining the network of EDIs at local level that really nurture this landscape of startups and having the gigafactories that condensate, intensify the efforts, we are combining the two approaches.
Yeah, I don't think it was implied that SMEs means thinking small. Is if anything, distributing the infrastructure investment in areas where there's no fertile ecosystem, which is a little bit what our paper does as well, is potentially problematic. But that said, I will collect. I want to say one thing before I go to Martin. And I know I don't know whether I'm right or wrong. You tell me, Gaspar. In the presentation of the new Horizon Europe proposal by the European Commission for the next budget cycle post-2028, there's a list of representative moonshots. And one of the representative moonshots is about advanced next-generation artificial intelligence. So perhaps that's the type of mission-oriented innovation policy and mission-oriented approach that we will want to see. Again, the paper I wrote and also involve some of you in conversation about last year. It's called a large-scale initiative on AI. It echoes a little bit what was said in the competitiveness compass. Well, actually, the competitiveness compass echoed what was said in that paper in saying that there need to be breakthroughs in ticking all the boxes of trustworthy AI, but then there needs to be not only the scientific work, but also work on concrete use cases in science, in robotics, and in the future of government and public services. So let's see if this is what will emerge out of that conversation and how likely is that to happen in a structure that decentralized or centralized, but might be in the form of a mission-oriented institution.
Well, that's for sure. I mean, this moonshot, this is our way to dream big. We really want to put all the elements of the puzzle together, the gigafactories, the research, the data from the data union, and to really have big projects mobilizing the best researchers in Europe. So that's what we aim to do in the short term.
Thanks, Gaspar. Martin.
Yeah, maybe a quick reaction also, knowing that we don't have much time. On the very first question concerning the interoperability, I think one thing we really have to keep in mind that this is not happening in a vacuum. We have a realpolitik situation at the moment of institutions that were standard setters, that are multilateral structures like the UN, are completely being hollowed out, you know, with players that are no longer European. And also what many are not seeing at the moment is how smart some of the big tech providers are actually now engaging within the open source ecosystem of the famous EEE type of approach of first embracing the open source community, extending the functionality, and then basically extinguishing all of that. And if you realize how flimsy some of these open source standards are, then we are really up against the clock here of not only, considering the technological discussion, but actually entering full force again in a concerted effort into the institutional gap that currently exists, where European diplomatic kind of muscles could play in a soft power approach. Concerning the whole question of spreading bets or just one goal, it's at the end of the day, again, it's about prioritizing. What can we do now, and what is somehow feasible at the end. And the very last point concerning the sovereignty definition, fully agree. I personally find the sovereignty notion very problematic. I think resilience is much, much better. And honestly, if we talk to each other about what this is about, it's about agency and it's about safeguarding the democratic project in very, very contentious times. And technology and our sovereignty within it is a means to an end, to ensure a European way of life that is under threat. Full stop, and we're not competitive either. So I think we have to get our priorities straight in this regard, because it's a real offer to the globe as well for those who actually abide by these values potentially as well.
Thanks a lot, Martin. I go to Marta, and then we close Michael.
I will touch upon sovereignty. We know that this debate is very emotional. It is a very emotional debate when it comes to sovereign cloud, when it comes to sovereign AI, and everybody has a different definition. The fact that the European Commission, that DigitDigit came out with their criteria is somehow setting something clear. We also have our own offering on sovereign cloud and also sovereign AI, so we also have our own definition. And probably SAP is a player who can deliver on very limited definition of sovereignty. However, we need to take into account that even such players as SAP have their dependencies. We were talking about compromises when it comes to sovereignty because Europe is not able to deliver on everything. We also need to compromise, and we are afraid that there is this rush to sovereignty everywhere. The problem is that everyone needs sovereignty, and sovereignty is at different levels. Obviously, infrastructure, technology, governance, data. You were touching on it in the previous presentations, and sometimes you need specific elements to protect your environment, not all of them. And also we see it with customers. They are sometimes very happy with the specific solutions we propose them. Sometimes they need more, sometimes they don't need, they just think they need. So this is a very complex discussion. There is no one answer probably, and even DigitDigit doesn't have one answer to this question. And when it comes very quickly to AI gigafactories, once again, we think that code over concrete, because with applications, we can deliver immediate value. So this is something that we as a company, we would put our focus on. And AI gigafactories is a massive investment. So we do have our concerns how it will be used going forward and how we'll give back the value put into this project.
Very good. Obviously, public-private investment. Let's see how it plays out. Michael, and we wrap up as we are behind you.
Just very few reactions very quickly, because I think the question of do we spread out our bets or do we go all in on something, I don't think either alone can work. We do need scale effects, that's clear. I think there are a couple of opportunities that I think you see come through the discussion here that are the chorus basically of the songs we all sing, and there, yes, I think we need to see where can we realize scale effects, and that will need a lot of flexibility in the member states now, so that we feel okay in Germany if something's located in the Netherlands, and our colleagues in France feel okay if something's located in Italy, and things like that. That's a long way to go, but I think that's absolutely necessary. At the same time, like I said before, we need to be nimble. So yeah, we need to try out different things. So I think what is important as we spread bets is that they are not too big, that we get quick signals from the market on what works, where there's promise, and also where there's dead ends. So that's really important, and I think then it makes sense to spread. But I would like to qualify that, the spreading bets. And then one thing, Andrea, you said regarding the United States, I think we're forgetting data as a point where we really need to think a little bit about the role data can play, and concretely. I don't know, I have a feeling in our Sunday speeches, everybody likes to talk about the great treasures in European industrial data. Well, yeah, but what's the moat around them? And I think that's something we really need to think about in the geopolitical situation we're in. And how do we operationalize one where we can say, yeah, there is an incentive to use data in Europe for Europe by Europeans. And I think that's something we still need to work on, both in terms of regulatory framework and in terms of the incentive structures we build in the infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Michael. We need to wrap up. We go for a coffee break, and we will reconvene for the next panel on job skills and careers. I want to thank all the speakers. I think we've really been digging a little bit into this topic to a level of detail which is not very common in Brussels conferences. So I want to thank you very much for this. Please join me in a big applause to all our speakers here. All right, and in today's marathon, 15 minutes coffee break. Try to talk to each other, try to mingle, try to network. Be back at 20 past. It's downstairs, is coffee.
For the moment, difficult to say, but surely the A4 will be full in a way or another. Not that I know for the moment, but surely the IFS will be the main entry point. Thank you for the good
pleasure. No, thank you. And you know, maybe having some coordination by design, factory level where still there's flexibility, might be a good idea. It doesn't have to be a heavyweight mechanism. It can just be a facilitation role or something like that, right? Also between the AI factories, it would be good to hear from the Commission that they appreciate. I mean, we've heard it from the reviewers, they like that a lot. And Jive has that mandate, but of course it needs to somehow be embraced by the others. I think that can win big time if we look at these things that right about CGI agents,
He's of course the Johnson, but we are the one of the
exactly.
This morning.
I think that's a great approach. The other thing that's really important, and I'm so happy to hear it, and now you talk about it in those terms, and also in the member state level, right? We've heard our chancellor, Merz, say the same thing. The gigafactories must not stop producing, right? The talent and the fundamental research aspect is absolutely essential because, you know, the big American tech companies, we can't emulate them, but when they do things well, what can they do, right?
Because our seat is
they do their fundamental research in-house for a very good reason, because that gives an edge, right? If we do that in the gigafactory, we can go very much further than just applying stuff. Yeah, applying stuff is important too, right? But I think we want both. We want solutions together. So there's a great chance.
Yeah, I do want to ask another question. You know that they're launching now today Race, the so-called talking about acceptance.
Thank you, madam.
Yes.
I didn't ask you about the city, OpenAI, Bell's Cloud, and so on, which to me is a good deal. So it's not being criticized. But it's been raising issues of sovereignty. And SAP is there was a reply that I saw. None of this is super official. I saw in social media. It was a good way of focusing on the differences between data operation and robots also. So very often you don't stack everything that they say there is a deal between a European company and an American company, start shouting. So
Sure. But what I'm saying is that I would have raised the issue with you. I mean, I think it's a good way. It's good, but I didn't do it because we think that also I think what that's work. Deliver. There's really things careful about
Exactly. And that's the right thing, and also the media factory. Right? Unless we build it by design. It's like when there's a great idea, but it wouldn't have been for the they're not the middle fall from the heavens.
And I was just wondering at the gathering meeting. So that by the time they realize that somebody else is rivaling their products, they have deals.
Very good. They will be different from these 77. I can tell you in Germany there's a lot of massaging going on, and that's right. That is a good thing, right? That's what should happen.
Just a quick question. Yes, actually,
also in terms of
you might have seen exactly. I sent a message because actually it's waiting in my inbox. And my world and then goes Uber director something good. We are going to Berlin. We're trying to spread on software. It's actually very interesting. So I mean, like, you have my contact.
I have your contact. It's just waiting in my inbox.
I think you have plenty. But anyway, I wanted
if you knew how behind the scenes we are struggling, let's do it quick.
It's hard because actually we're trying to work with AI. So we're trying to do something together, but like all the part of the
same for us, which is why we decided to do the day before.
Exactly.
And now slowly we kind of get the visibility of all the programs we kind of involved this time.
I saw that they published the summit program. It's still very flimsy. And it's very hard to get also.
I know. You should come to the summit because it will be a good snapshot.
That would be great.
After, and you're not alone by, dealing with uncertainty.
Absolutely. And it was a very good expert here. I was like, Martin, enormous amount of money. Okay, thanks for coming up. Thanks so much money in yours then.
Why can we not, on let's say, and it's not you personally, because you are representing members, so they block super public, go in and say, okay, let's define my contact, main questions we all can agree on. That could be automotive, it could be environmental, it could be defense. It probably would be defense. Say, how can we take this part of money that also EU has, and we simply say, for these 2 or 3 questions, and we now say, technology, this is how we use it to leave a movement, and it's going to be 27 to agree. The ones who agree, the Singapore model, Asian SEM, we just do whatever, and who wants to join, get part of the money, the rest who are sleeping, they will make we choose.
We're not there yet.
Yes.
Then you use this together and you do it competitively.
People from this side, they like
that will come.
Every time there is something
that's real business. Real business model.
Because you're an American company. Sovereignty washing. That independent thing.
Has that been decided, or is it in the process?
You also have an interest. I don't have an interest. I'm an independent think tanker. I have the privilege of not having an agenda. Maybe it's not the agenda of things that are actually
That's what puts us in the privileged position.
We were supposed to talk about industrial policy, strategic advantage. We were talking about
Eventually, this is the topic of the day. When we look at the apply AI strategy, it's all about sovereignty. Today is a little bit of a two-way zone. We started from the data, the papers that we published, the now we talk about drones.
For a limited number of
And I might invite Christian to the Ideas Lab, the annual conference. I think we almost had it earlier this year.
Yes, exactly. We cannot think about 5 years having too big or too small. Get on.
Something again, exactly. Session about sovereignty.
Okay.
Next year, 2nd and 3rd of March.
No.
So we have,
but there's sufficient money next to that. That's just what I think.
because it's such a massive investment and we have no idea how it will
And 30 billion
exactly
of proposed investment. So it's not a problem of it's a problem of putting that together
in the kitchen and there is nothing out of it.
And
today I invited many of the chief economist teams from the different DGs of the Commission to discuss industrial strategy. Because we have a big stream of research that says when we apply complexity analysis, understanding what each region in Europe could do or should do. So we're doing this analysis for Lower Saxony, Germany. We've done it for Sweden, the Hanover area. In Germany, we're doing it for Flanders. We will do this for Greece. Understanding what's the technical and scientific specialization of these areas, what they can cooperate, what are areas they can
Is that possible?
So it could be AI, it could be whatever, life sciences.
And you're getting the lowest common denominator, which is yours.
And it's a huge investment, but the Commission is interested in using these tools. Now it seems that they give us some resources to put into this.
And maybe clean glasses.
I think vous avez just brought the new ones.
You know,
thank you very much for your invitation.
Pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Great comments. All right. Take care. We talk soon.
I want to quickly say hello. Hi. I'm Max from Euractiv. Tech reporter. I cover AI. And yeah, obviously this is all very, very interesting. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'll have a look at the paper. It was published today.
And time speech today.
At New York.
Just right before the event, we said we've just timed it in the morning. Whoever wanted to see.
I was running around a bit.
No, very cool. It's called, if I remember correctly, if I remember the final title,
How does it work with Slovenia, for example, being up in arms because certain ESA activities don't happen there?
But yeah, it's because I had this map where I tried to put all the versions or pitches that we've already known about. It's a bit strange.
But if you do it really by an organization that is fully accountable, like ESA is for the serious investment of the member states, why not, right?
Yeah, okay, I'll have to read that and I'll get back to you with some questions.
Yes. But that's also maybe something to think, to be honest with you, right? Exactly.
And Nicoletta, my daughter, is Bulgarian. So
it's a great thing and it should be there, You're exactly right, and I would not want to suppose at all that the AI office doesn't play an important role. The question is, can it do it all, right? Is the job perhaps too big for one office within one, within one DG? I wonder about that, right? I mean, quite honestly,
everybody
I feel in size, you might find it easier.
Okay, I'll have to read through this.
And together,
I also have to run something, but I think I'll have to stay in contact in the future.
appointed people
Exactly, yeah.
run an
He used
agency
to
rather than the institution itself.
But anything tech, please
has a broader palette of
enjoy the rest of the conference.
Bye. Hey, Andreas. Hey. All good with you? Hello.
And then, of course, I mean, it's clear that the European Commission plays a key role in all of this, for example, through regulation, right? And through standards and all of this sort of thing, and investments into the research programs and all of this, right? There's a broad spectrum, but in space as well, this is nicely coordinated with the organization, right? So there are good patterns for doing this as well, same way. Absolutely. You're right, but that works well for space. It's the particle physics. In space, I think it's better to be out here because that brings more together.
Somewhere. Whose money is doing that? Which one? But this will become as the accelerator and certificate. Whether we like it or not, I leave you with that. Sorry, I didn't want to put a barrier between the two of you. And you might have to go for coffee. Yeah, you deserve that. Thanks a lot. It was very good. You gave me so much. That was really useful.
All right. Just but not now, later. All right. Welcome back to the second half. Feel free to take a seat. Amazing. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for coming back to this room. I hope you're all caffeinated now and hydrated and ready for some more. Yes. We have some empty spots in the front. Hi, Alex. All right, we had a busy first half of the event, very packed. All right, take a seat. So we heard all about the innovation ecosystem for AI in Europe. But as the representative of, did I do that? No. Of SAP was talking about, after the innovation happens the diffusion and the implementation, and that happens inside organizations and workplaces, and that drastically changes the jobs and the careers of people. So that's the second half of today's program. Just like Andrea and Pierre-Alex did a bit of stock taking on the innovation side, I'm going to do this for the jobs and skills side, together with Elena, who from Lightcast, who have been an important partner for us in this project. And yeah, so you can see my name. My name is Laura Nurski. I run the Future of Work program here at CEFS. If I can have my slides. Yes. So I'm going to take you through the work that we've been doing in our unit on jobs and skills over the past 2 years that we've been running this program. And when I tried to gather everything that we did, I detected in hindsight that we worked on 4 work streams, which I think is helpful to look at the work we've done. So we've worked on methods for assessing the role of AI in the future of work. Then we split our thinking into some analytical building blocks, like tasks and skills. And then we tried to bring it all back together from these components back up to a systems view on what AI is doing to workplaces. On the methods, recently a colleague and I put out an explainer on the methods to prepare the labor market for what's coming at us. It's a toolkit for anticipating the future of work. And we talk about very different types of methods for doing this, from forecasting, very quantitative ways of trying to predict the future, to foresight, trying to explore different kinds of futures, all the way to backcasting, trying to pick a future and help us get there. We talked also about these different ways of looking at the future in one of our podcast episodes that we launched as part of this project. We had Carl Frey from the University of Oxford, who was one of the pioneers of one of the methods that we discussed, namely the task-based approach. And together with Nikki Dries, who is at KU Leuven and exploring the future of work, more through discourse analysis and analyzing science fiction and newspapers and how they are looking at the future of work. So I highly recommend this episode if you are looking for some entertainment in your car or on the train. Then we talked also on our podcast on skills with a colleague of Elena and with Cinzia on how policy is shifting its focus from looking at labor as a cost to minimize towards human capital, which is an investment to make, and what that means for investing in foundational skills and AI skills. Then we had an event also with Elena, so that you can see why she's here today, where she advocated for a data-driven and place-based approaches that integrate specialized AI skills with transversal and complementary skills. And then we used also the data that Lightcast provided us with in this project on AI job vacancies to look where the gaps are between the job vacancies and the AI talent in Europe at different levels of expertise. So we discovered that there's not only a shortage in high-end top AI skills, top AI developers, but also at the foundational level of AI literacy. Then when it comes to tasks, we spend a lot of time in the project thinking about how AI is transforming knowledge work. Some people at another event at a panel that we hosted talked about the industrial revolution of knowledge work and how AI is driving productivity growth in knowledge-intensive AI investing sectors around the world. In the AI world that Pierre-Alex showcased earlier, we also put not only the job vacancies, the AI vacancies, but we also collected different exposure scores that try to assess at the level of each occupation how exposed it is to AI. So if you go to aiworld.eu and then you click on occupations, you can see hundreds of occupations, and for each one you can see what different authors in the literature are saying about how exposed the task content of that occupation is to AI. And also these measures indicate that it's mainly professional knowledge work in ICT, in financial services, professional services that are most suited for current AI applications. And then finally, we had David Otter on our podcast as well, where he advocated that we could actually leverage this potential to augment humans in those middle-skilled knowledge jobs by democratizing expertise that was previously not available to middle-skilled workers, and in this way sustaining a new division of labor and creating more labor market opportunities. And then finally, from tasks to systems, which is also what's going to be the topic of the panel later today. In actually the very first publication that I put out here at CEPS, I argued that real gains do not come from task-level automation, but from system redesign with AI. So this paper is now 1.5 years old, but I think it's still very relevant. Today, we talked about this also with the previous Nobel Prize winner, Doron Acemoglu, about how we need to change institutions, but also modernize the government and even change management models inside organizations to ensure that AI empowers workers rather than centralized control. And finally, I think this week, one of the last publications of this project is going to come out. It's a foresight report on AI and the future of work. We explored many different futures. And you can see actually everything coming together, from the methods to the skills to the tasks to the systems in this report. And we show how different futures require different policies to ensure that AI delivers public value and inclusion. It was a collective effort with many people who are in the room today and who I'm very grateful for their inputs and their collaboration. All of these publications are free and available online. I've also put on a QR code. It's actually the first time I did this. Please go and read them. And then I'm going to give the word to Elena, who is going to dive deeper in one of those verticals, the skills. And then we're going to move on to the panel. So, thank you.
Okay, while we wait for my slide, thank you, Laura, for the introduction, and also for all the great work that you've been doing over the last couple of years on this topic, because it's such an important issue at the European level, but also more broadly internationally. And it's been great to see all the collection of the research that you've done. As Laura mentioned, we have been a partner of this project. As Likecast, it provides data to think tanks like CEPS, educators, governments, and companies to try to understand what's happening in the labor market and unlock new possibilities for workers. And we work with organizations through sharing data, but we also do a lot of research ourselves to guide organizations through labor market changes. And as Laura mentioned today, we're all about not just focusing on the future of work, but on the impact that AI has on the future of work. And we have a couple of reports. Actually, all of these reports are available again for free on our website, so you can check this out. And we're focusing today specifically on the impact of AI research of AI on the labor market. We do this with a key idea. We collect a lot of data on the labor market. We think the labor market is very complex. And so the idea behind our thinking is that you need to triangulate many different data points to understand what's happening in the full picture. And so a lot of the things I'm going to discuss today focus particularly on one data set, which is job postings, the type of information that employers put online when they're recruiting for new workers. And from this data, we can collect information about the jobs they are recruiting, the skills, the occupations, the locations. And much of what I'm going to say today is based on this data. And the other data that we're currently exploring and will be like a segue that maybe we'll discuss in the panel afterwards is also about workers' profiles and what that can tell us about AI in the labor market. But talking about AI, the first thing that we did looking at job postings data was to try and understand what are the skills that employers actually need when they are recruiting for workers in relation to AI. And the reason why we did this is because when we hear a conversation about artificial intelligence in relation to the labor market, we hear a lot of very scary headlines on AI taking over jobs, AI automating tasks and cutting off all the entry-level jobs, or being putting at displacement older workers. We wanted to cut through all this noise and try to focus on those specific things that can actually help people prepare for a world of work that is driven by by AI. And we found three things that I wanted to talk about today. The first one is that when we're thinking about AI, which is a very big topic, this is no longer just something that is happening in the tech bubble, in the tech jobs. It's not just about the software developers, it's about all of us. Increasingly, in the last couple of years, we are seeing demand for AI being requested in job ads for work like researcher and economist, but also marketing, finance, etc. So we need to think about it more broadly than just something that's happening in tech. The other thing that we're seeing, especially when we're looking at job ads, is that employers are truly willing to pay a premium for the workers that have these AI skills. So it's not just they're looking for it, but they're willing to pay more. That more is quantifiable in a 28% salary premium. These stats, I know we're in a European setting and we don't love talking about American things. These stats come from American data because we in Europe are not as good at putting salary information in job ads. But it's a point to say that we are willing, employers, companies are willing to pay a premium for people that have AI skills. But then thirdly, the other thing that we find in this research is that while AI is being requested in every job function, each job function and each occupation is at a different stage when it comes to AI adoption and therefore needs different strategy. And to give you a sense of that, you don't need to follow all these points, but here we try to plot and categorize different job functions based on their speed of adoption of AI and their current demand for AI. And so on the top right, what we call AI hotspots, where you see IT and computer science, for example, these are jobs where AI demand is high and is growing quite fast. And then there are other parts of the labor market, like the emerging frontiers, like sales, healthcare, where the demand is not as high right now, but is growing really fast. And so they present a real opportunity for us to be proactive in the way we think about these roles. But not only different jobs are on different trajectories when it comes to AI, they also require different AI skills. Now, I know this one is hard to read from afar, so just follow the logic of the darker, the lighter the color, the more demand for that specific AI skills. And the point I want to make here is that we have been discussing it all today. We talk about AI. But AI in itself means many different things and also means many different skills for workers. And what we did here was to try to break down for different job functions the type of AI skills that are being most in demand. You will see there are two columns, artificial intelligence, machine learning, that are among the AI skills that are most requested, pretty much across all the different job functions, but then there are differences. For example, if we think about HR, actually is not all AI that is needed in HR, it's natural language processing. If we're thinking about design and media, they need a lot of generative AI. If we think about healthcare, it's actually robotics. And if we think about maintenance and repair, it's about autonomous vehicles, for example, and transportation, again, it is about autonomous driving. So different jobs, different career journeys to AI, and different skills. But the flip side of this in terms of skills is that there are some skills that aren't changing. And so we looked at across all the job ads that mention AI skills. And we try to understand what were the skills that were most frequently cited in these jobs. And we see that only 2 of the 8 skills that are most frequently mentioned are AI skills. The others are deeply human skills where we continue to have an advantage over the machine. Skills like communication, management, leadership, problem solving. So when it comes to skills, which is one of the verticals, some things are different, some are similar. And I mean, we're going to discuss more of this on the panel as well, but I just want to conclude by saying the world of work is changing at an unprecedented ways. Are we prepared for this? And this means different things for universities, businesses, policy, etc. And so I'm going to just leave it there, and then we'll continue next in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena. I just realized maybe I haven't introduced you with your full title yet, but Elena is Head of Global Research at Lightcast, a labor market and analytics provider. Of course, we need to have a gender-balanced panel, so we also have invited some men. I'm kidding. So I'm kidding. I'm going to invite them up to the stage. First is Andreas Aktoudianakis, if I pronounce that correctly. He's the lead EU of public affairs at Google. Please join us. Then I have Alex Petropoulos, who is an advanced AI researcher at the Center for Future Generations. Welcome. And finally, Andrea Glorioso, who is a policy officer at the European Commission's DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. Welcome, everyone. So Elena already had some time to introduce herself, and I'm going to give the other speakers a chance to introduce themselves as well, and I'm going to ask them also a question to get them started. So Andreas, if I can start with you, working at Google, how are you seeing AI change the way organizations operate from the inside, maybe even Google itself, beyond just automating tasks? Do you think companies are rethinking also their organizational models or the way they make decisions or how they structure their teams using AI?
Thank you, Laura, and thanks everybody. Thank you for inviting me here today. I think the answer is yes. All of these things are happening, and I think if we had to summarize the areas where we see change happening, I would be saying there is a systemic shift in organization models. There is a re-engineering of decision making, and there is also transformation happening on the workforce. Now, if you look at the first part, I think the organization models we're talking about, basically we're seeing there is a thinning middle management. And that means that a lot of work that used to be more repetitive is now acted upon with using different interfaces. So maybe a few decisions that need to take place can happen. These decisions can be taken faster. This, of course, means changing structures, but also it's also part of the general trends we're seeing changing. For example, there are new roles that you see companies hiring for. And 10 years ago, when I joined Brussels, I remember it was a trend. You had lots of digital policy analyst positions. And now you have a CEO or CFO for AI adoption and things like that, which means that the private sector and companies are taking up the challenge and are taking this, head on. Now, in terms of decision making, I think we see lots of trends. I would focus mainly on what we would like it to be, a democratization of information. And that means that lots of information that is complex and hard to go through, and we're talking about, repetitive tasks like in accounting, finance. You can't expect an individual to analyze so much information so quickly. So technically, with an AI interface, you can expect that people with more basic knowledge on a certain topic can ask plain questions to a AI chatbot and then get responses based on this information that would be so hard to tackle. So that is some type of democratization where people with fewer skills can actually access really complex information and make sense out of it. I think that's really important also looking at agentic AI, which will be something that will come at some point in the coming time ahead of us. I mean, all things are going so fast. So with agentic AI, that will definitely have an impact. And there we will realize also a little bit from my point that we have stayed a little bit back in terms of the digitalization and the EU Digital Decade goals, because for all of these things to happen, democratization of information within businesses, you need to make sure that there is a central place where all of this information can be, and that can be a cloud, can be some type of infrastructure that the Digital Decade has specified. We need a 75% adoption. We're not there. So making that would be the foundation of what agentic could offer then to our workforce. So I think there's a few things for us to tackle there. And then lastly, in terms of workforce transformation, I think it's all there, but at the same time, we used to talk about basic digital skills up to 80% by 2030. That was the goal of the Digital Decade. And we're not there. We're currently at 56%, which means we need to do quite a few increases until 2030 to meet that. And on ICT specialists, we wanted to have 20 million, and currently we're at 10.3 million. So all of these are issues that we will need to tackle. And I think, beyond the sheer numbers of millions and 20 millions, I think we also need to look a little bit deeper, because there has been noted that there is a deficit of diversity in ICT specialists across the single market. And so whatever we're training and whatever goal we achieve, we also need to make sure that it responds to our values and how we envision us as a society and a workforce.
Very, very true. Thank you so much, Andreas. Alex, Your work also focuses on advanced AI and how we govern it, really like the big picture structures. Do you think today's organizations, like whether they're companies or public institutions, are prepared for the scale and the speed of AI advancements? Or do you think that we need some new governance models, new organizational models to deal with AI?
No. I'll expand, but no, we're not prepared. So the way I like to think about this is, if you believe that AI will be really transformative, if you believe it's going to be like this fourth industrial revolution, you look at the last industrial revolution, you say, okay, that happened over 200 years, and over that time we had all these new institutions appear, all of these new problems, and then we solved them. But now if we say, okay, fourth industrial revolution, we only have maybe 10 years, a decade, maybe less, to go through this entire change. I think then you should be like quite worried about the fact that we have to set up all these new institutions, we have to set up all of these new ways of dealing with problems in a really small time frame. So what that means is, that means state capacity, right? Improving the ability of the state, of public institutions to be able to respond to stuff. And I think it means state capacity in 3 different areas. So we need better information, and then we need better preparedness of risks, and then we need better preparedness of opportunities. So I'll give some examples of like ways I think you can do this. So better information, you have things like the AI Safety Institutes, AI Security Institutes. These are like organizations that exist in the UK, they've got a really good one. They also exist in like Canada and South Korea. And these are essentially talent from AI labs who have chosen to go work in government for the mission of helping government be more prepared, helping government be more informed about what's happening in companies and what's happening within the AI models themselves, understanding what's happening in the inside. The EU has the AI office. I don't really think we're doing that great here when it comes to solving this problem of actually getting information. AI office is doing some jobs. It has many, many jobs to do, but when it comes to the job of actually giving government information about what we can expect, I think we could do a lot better. Then you have like preparedness for different risks. You're like, okay, what if powerful AI systems make it such that we're more vulnerable to like cyber attacks or more vulnerable to like new novel pandemics? And you're like, okay, how do we deal with this? Well, the default Russell's answer to this is like, okay, we need to like make it illegal to do cybercrime, and we have to make it illegal to do a pandemic. It's like, okay, that doesn't work. We need to actually build solutions. We need to have a sort of solutions-oriented mindset in order to solve this. You know, when we had new problems that came in the last industrial revolution, we created new organizations to solve them. We created new teams who were thinking, okay, how can we actually build a solution? So I think we need to really reevaluate how we look at R&D organizations and set up new types of R&D organizations that can be thinking about societal resilience at that level. And then the last thing, that possibly the most important one, is preparing for the opportunities. And by that I mean, it's not obvious or inevitable that we actually get the benefits of AI. Because I think what happens is AI comes into your workforce, it automates one thing, it makes one thing really happen very well. And then what happens? You say, that one thing's really good. Now, something else down the line becomes way more important, right? The bottleneck has shifted. And so all of your existing workflow, your existing sort of work stream is now really focused on this one bottleneck. I'll give like an example. Let's say you're doing AI in science and you've got this AI system and it's like, it's really making it very easy to develop new drug candidates. You've got all these millions and millions of drug candidates, but it still takes 3 months to do a clinical trial. And like 3 months is being really generous. It takes maybe years depending on your regulatory setup. So now it doesn't actually matter that you've got these AI scientists doing stuff. All of the bottlenecks have shifted into this one other thing. And so we don't actually get the benefits. And so I think that as Europe, we actually have quite a few of these bottlenecks, regulatory, cultural, systemic, and we're actually quite bad at solving these bottlenecks. And we don't actually have anyone who's in charge of thinking about how to prevent and tackle these bottlenecks. So I think we almost need to set up a new department like DG Bottleneck or something, which is like really locked in to anticipating these problems. And it might be regulatory, or it might be thinking this whole new thing, like maybe we don't need to do clinical trials. Maybe we could have an AI simulate the entire body and how the drug affects there. So, I mean, sort of spanned a lot of different places, but in many ways we're not ready. But in many ways we can actually be ready, and that's sort of what actually keeps me optimistic.
Is this one on also?
It was on mute. But thank you so much. Food for thought, actually, and a good segue to Andrea, who is at DG Bottleneck. Oh no, at DG Employment. So Alex talked about the state capacity for better information, for preparing for risks, and also for preparing for opportunities. Do you recognize any of the three that the DG is putting more or less focus on, or how do you see AI changing the workplace? Do you see any? Is DG Employment anticipating any broader transformations to the workplace in terms of risks or opportunities?
Thank you. And I understood DG bottleneck would actually be a good thing because the DG that should fix the bottlenecks. But alas, that's not our job. So I don't want to disappoint anyone. Because if I may, before I get to the way we see to the evolution of labor markets following the application of AI, I would like to point out that at the end of the day, there will always be one bottleneck, which is us, human beings. And I think we need to be very conscious about that, because when we talk about AI or technological innovation in general, it's very easy and it's a good thing to get very excited. And don't get me wrong, I personally believe, and it's also the position of the European Commission, that technological innovation is good. We will not be able to live the lifestyle that we live. We will not be able to live the length of lives that we live, the quality of life, without technologies of all kinds. But it's also very easy to get overly excited, and I'm now not a young person anymore, and one advantage of being not so young is to see the same cycles time and again. AI has a lot of opportunity, but for the younger people in the room, believe me, this is not the first time that we hear that some kind of technology will revolutionize everything. Will change everything, will completely upend our societies. We will see whether AI is such technology. I have my doubts. And what this means for labor markets is that now it is clear that AI is already introducing changes in labor markets in Europe and in the rest of the world, is probably going to produce more changes, so we need to be able to react to that. And I think we really need to start from the principle, and one first principle is that we already have laws. And if I may slightly push back on what the previous speaker said, making things illegal is not always a bad thing, because there used to be a time where it was perfectly legal to have 8-year-old children working mice. And then at some point we made it illegal. And at the time, a lot of companies complained that this would put them out of business because it was impossible to compete against the country which actually used 8-year-old, but somehow they survived. They innovated. So don't get me wrong, I'm not the typical commission official who thinks that rules and laws are the response to everything, but sometimes they're a pretty good thing because they really force organizations to rethink the way they approach things. And this is true for labor markets as well. Secondly, we obviously need, and by we I mean we collectively, because let us also be very clear and pragmatic, the European Commission, the Union, has limited powers when it comes to labor markets and social policies. I know this is very boring to say, but that is the institutional reality in which we live in. There is no scenario in which somebody in Brussels wakes up, goes to member states and tells them, from now on, this is how you're going to regulate labor markets. That's not going to work. We have certain powers, but they are relatively, well, from my perspective, relatively limited, but they are nonetheless not 100%. We don't have that kind of power. What we can do and what we're doing is to work especially with what we call the social partners, which are the representatives, the established representatives of business and labor, because at the end of the day, we need workers to actually, and this will be my closing point, we need workers to actually accept these technologies. Let me run a very quick poll. All of you, imagine that somebody comes to you and tells you, I am going to transform you. I'm going to transform your life. I'm going to transform your work. How would you react? I think most of us will say, whoa, wait a second, who are you? And what power do you have to tell me how I should transform my life? Workers' involvement and workers' participation is absolutely necessary across all sectors. And yes, part of it is also telling workers, listen, some of the ways that you used to do things in your jobs are not going to work anymore. So yes, you need to update, you need to adapt yourselves. But this is not going to happen by simply imposing things on workers. We know by experience that that's not going to work.
Thank you. Yes. So you talked about how rules can force innovation and how the abolishment of child labor also pushed companies to innovate. And sometimes it's hard to envisage what a new innovated system will look like. That's why we tend to focus a lot on the tasks. We can automate this one task or give an agent this one workflow, but it's hard to see how the whole system can change. While actually throughout the industrial revolutions, always the biggest productivity increases have come from the system change. And to help you think through the steps from moving to tasks to systems, I've invited an author of a book to send in a video. The book is called Reshuffle, and the author talks about how AI can unbundle tasks that used to group together in jobs and rebundle them across a whole new workflows, but even whole new organizational models, new business models, and even new ecosystems and value chains. So it's just a 3-minute video that is going to appear any moment now on the screen. I would invite you to watch it with me, and then either discuss or reject the premise of the author. And I hope it can give us some interesting food for thought.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about the AI reshuffle. And the idea of the AI reshuffle, which I talk about in my book, is really this, that when we think about AI, very often we are looking at it with the wrong lens. We are looking at it with the lens of how it speeds up tasks, how it automates or augments our capacity to perform tasks. But we're really missing out on the idea that the real impact of AI plays out at the level of changing the entire system, not just the individual tasks, but the workflows in which those tasks sit, the organizational structures in which those workflows sit, and the competitive environments in which our organizations function. The real impact of AI plays out by its ability to really restructure all of these different systems at different levels. Let's take a couple of examples. If you think about how algorithmic coordination has happened over the last several years, we've seen parts of the job increasingly become unbundled and the remaining parts being coordinated by algorithms. We see this in the on-demand economy, for instance, with companies in food delivery and ride sharing. But with AI, a lot of those effects come to knowledge work as well, because a lot of our work is composed of activity that was traditionally tightly coupled with human ability to gain knowledge or to gain learning and through that perform knowledge work. But increasingly, simple forms of knowledge work can be performed unbundled from human ability. And so a lot of work that used to require us to hire people, train them, and get them to perform that work can now be performed using AI models, for instance. What this then means is that it potentially changes who gets to perform what, it changes the nature of jobs, but not because AI replaces or augments tasks, but because the entire structure of work fundamentally changes. A very good way to understand this is to think about the impact of the shipping container, a topic I talk about in the book extensively. If you think of the invention of the shipping container, the first order effects of the shipping container's invention was really just to automate the port. Because once the container was standardized, port operations could be automated. You could now have cranes instead of humans working with cargo. But the real effects of the shipping container played out through second and third order effects, when as trucks, trains, and ships agreed on a common standard and common format for the shipping container, global freight became more reliable, and with that, global supply chains came into being, and a new geopolitical order happened as a result. And that's the kind of effect, second order and third order effects, that we're going to see with AI coming in. It's not the local automation that matters, it's the full redesign of the system that really matters. And that's what my work Reshuffle essentially talks about.
Right. So I'm very curious to hear what you think. One of the things that he mentions is this idea of algorithmic management, which is also a topic currently being investigated at the Commission, especially in the platform economy. There's been also a big survey now in Europe that shows that this algorithmic coordination is not just a phenomenon anymore of the platform economy, but is increasingly present in traditional workplaces. So I'm just going to put this question out to all of the panelists. First, this idea of unbundling jobs into individual tasks and then having algorithms coordinate them. Is this something that you see in your own job, in your own organization as a big trend or not? And then how you might, see, if you have any ideas on how you might think these systems might rebundle in the future. Anyone? I see Andreas smiling a lot. Do you want to go first?
Thank you. I was smiling, but I wasn't planning to be first, but no problem. Yeah. I think there is a lot to unpack there before going to that topic around algorithmic. In a way, I think what the author refers to is what we refer to in the technology sector as agentic AI. But at the same time, I think these changes are happening organically, and every organization, you know, and a bit like Anna Karenina opening, every organization is driving AI in their own way. And ideally, they shouldn't be unhappy, but they should be happy. So I'm not sure I can offer very much insight into that, but I think that generally speaking, we need to let these changes take place, but with the right guardrails, etc. But I just can't stop thinking about European competitiveness. And I think all discussions today, at least from my point of view, not today here, but I mean nowadays in the EU, are basically about competitiveness. How can we enable our workforce to become more productive while preserving the big labor fights and wins of the past? So my question is, how can we become more competitive with algorithmic, what was the term? Algorithmic management, but at the same time keep everything else that's under our feet and keeps us where we are. Yeah.
I'm going to give the word to Elena, but you mentioned at the beginning one of the trends you saw was this thinning layer of middle management, right?
Yeah, I can explain more what I meant about that. I think there are some roles that we have, for example, at Google, that now people can actually work on more meaningful tasks, and you can have middle management, but middle management often tends to work in a silo, and I'm sure all organizations have that. So in a middle management position, we have so many people working on one specific problem, but if they don't speak with other parts of this middle management, then all of the machine doesn't work in the same direction. So I think that is perhaps, you know, what the thinning middle management means, basically that you can have a bigger view on the bigger scale of things and how they operate and how to address them. And then by doing so, you can drive decision-making faster within organizations. And if you want to stretch it a little bit, that could also mean that you can become more productive and more profitable and more competitive.
Elena, your take?
Yeah, I think my answer to that is that I like the idea, but I don't think we are there yet, and we need to be more intentional if we want to get there. And I'm going to bring 2 points to this. First, this idea of unbundling jobs into tasks. This isn't new. This is something that we work with employers, and we've heard for a long time now. And actually, maybe it's not about task. They talk about skills-based, but it's pretty much, the concept is quite similar. It's unbundling a job, and rather than caring about a job title, looking at the specific skills that are required or the task carried out. So in that sense, the unbundling is already happening. Where I'm saying we're not there yet is when it comes to linking this with AI, in the sense that what we are seeing when it comes to AI adoption in the workplace is actually that at the moment it's very scattered, like it's individuals driven. So I figure out a new tool, I figure out how to use it in my job, I get better at my job. But companies are not there yet at the point of actually having a company-wide structure for how to embed AI, a company-wide strategy for AI. And so for me, and that's at a company level, and then company by company, and goes back to Andrea's point about fragmentation. Each company is choosing a different strategy because we're so focused on competitiveness that we want to be the one at the top, that we are not doing it together. And so that for me is where we need to be more intentional. And then last point, we started doing some work on trying to understand who has AI skills and who is the AI talent. And one point to mention is that the share of companies that mention AI skills is quite small still, even if it's growing rapidly, and same for talent. And the AI talent that we see is still very limited demographically to certain groups. And so that, again, can affect the ability to adopt at scale this algorithm management.
Yes, thank you. For full disclosure, before this panel, when Laura sent us the video to see it, I asked her, is it okay if I challenge the assumptions of the video? And she said, not only it's okay, but I expect that of you. So I will, but in fact, it's not that I want to challenge the assumptions there, because as I said, and I want to be very clear there, at the end of the day, we do want more technology in European organizations. Just to give some numbers, we're still not doing great, because according to the latest Eurostat data, I think around 13% of European companies are using AI at any level, up from a meager 8% or some time ago. So, that's the situation in which we are. We want more AI, we want more technology, but at some point we also need to ask ourselves, and especially ask people, because we are democracies here in Europe. We cannot impose things on our people. We need to be very, very clear on that. And to state the obvious, people are not shipping containers. And the idea of unbundling skills, tasks, jobs, it's not a new idea. By the way, that's been the pipe dream of Taylorism since it was first introduced. It's a debate that we've been having for a long time. And yes, to some extent, we can make work more efficient, and that's a good thing. But at some point, we also need to keep in mind, because as I said, people are not shipping containers, is why are we doing that? Because believe it or not, most people, Europeans or not, they don't wake up in the morning and go to work and think, how can I make Europe more competitive? That is not their first order of thought. They usually think, I want to do a job that pays the bills, that I kind of like, and then gives some meaning to my life. And so we need to be very, very careful as we introduce these technologies. We promote the introduction of these technologies in workplace, which we want to do. At the same time, we also need to make sure that we don't create a situation in which people are so unbundled, to use the term of the video, from the meaning that they give to the job, that basically they don't give a damn about it. And societies in which people don't give a damn about what they're doing, they are very brittle societies that can go down very quickly. And I don't think that's the scenario. So for all these reasons, when I hear this kind of videos, I'm like, fine, it's not the first time we hear about all these dreams. And yes, there will be second or third order effects, and that's fascinating to study them. But in the very boring and real world in which I live in which I need indirectly to convince European citizens to go in one direction or the other, I'm not so sure that's the best argument to use, to be very honest.
I'm going to challenge the challenge. I'll first engage with the video itself and say why I agree with it. I think this is a different framing of the thing I was talking about before with bottlenecks, right? Bottleneck theory, unbundling theory, whatever you want to call it. I'll touch on how I see this play out in my own work. So I work in a think tank, Center for Future Generations, and we do a lot of research, and then we take that research and we try and influence organizations. We lobby, right? So where I see AI affecting this currently is AI has massively changed the way we do research, right? Our productivity on the research level, it can do literature reviews better than me. If I'm using the best model, the one that costs like 200 euros a month or whatever, it's doing a better job than me. It's doing research faster than me. It's doing research at a scope and a scale better than I could. So if I'm now looking and I'm hiring my interns or I'm hiring my fellows, what am I hiring them for? Because before, you would hire them as a research assistant to do that. You'd hire them, say, I'm really interested in this one thing. Can you go and write a 10-pager and brief me on it and then show me? What do I hire them for? And where has the bottleneck moved? The bottleneck has moved to the contextualization and has moved to the in-person like taking that research and actually getting impact out of it. So what are the language models bad at doing within the research? They're bad at saying, oh, actually, Commissioner so-and-so said this yesterday, and so this research report should really reflect this new priority in the way that this whole political environment. Or it's really bad at contextualizing, oh, actually, this isn't quite relevant for this project because we're actually thinking about it from this side. So I want my intern to come in and give me that contextualization. I want my intern to come in and give me interesting tacit knowledge from different domains that are like our current AI systems are quite, they sort of revert to the mean often. They give you a very average model of the world. And so I'm looking for people who are a bit weird, who are a bit spiky, who will be engaging with the parts of society that are on the edges, because that's where you're finding the information that actually these models won't be bringing up. And these are things that larger companies will have figured out already, but now I think smaller organizations, because the basic has been automated away and because the research has been done, now the bottleneck has moved to the frontier, and now the bottleneck has moved to where it's actually useful. And so if you're hiring someone, you're like, actually, I really want you to have good people skills. I really want you to be a bit weird in a good way. I really want you to be able to contextualize things and just give me that alpha that's useful. And then I guess to challenge you directly, like you say, people don't wake up and want competitiveness. Absolutely. But it's in the name of competitiveness because we're competing with someone else. We're competing with other countries around the world. And the thing is, yeah, I'm not saying to these people, you need to change your jobs and change the way you work because I want it. But at the end of the day, your job isn't going to be replaced by an AI. Your job's going to be replaced by someone else who's using an AI and other countries who are using AI. And the fact of the matter is, we currently have systems and we currently have labor markets and labor laws that are more restrictive than most other countries in the world. We have this sort of straitjacket that we've put around ourselves. And so when you talk about social cohesion, when we talk about what is it that people want, well, I think people want clean streets, people want safe streets, people want good healthcare, and all of that stuff costs money. And if we're engaging in an environment where our share of the pie has been eaten by other countries who are claiming these benefits faster than us, then I don't see how we get there. And this isn't necessarily just my view. I think this is the view of the Commission when it says it wants to prioritize competitiveness. I think it's also the view of the Commission when Ursula von der Leyen says we expect human-level AI systems by 2030. So to that end, I've seen the ending, and for me, it's just about how do we get to the finish line, because it's really unavoidable in that sense.
Oh, great. Did you read the book yet? No? I think you will enjoy it, because he actually talks about how a system is only as fast as the slowest component, so the bottleneck in the system, and how AI moves the bottleneck around. So kind of your point. And I also thought it was very interesting that you gave the example of how it's changing research and the dynamic between a senior and an intern. I mean, we experienced the same things, like asking for a literature review or cleaning a data set. I can do that much quicker myself with AI than asking a research assistant or an intern. But on the other hand, we do want a lot of good quality jobs for our interns, so we can feed our talent pipeline and have lots of seniors sitting on this stage in 5 years. And I think this is a dynamic that is recognizable for a lot of knowledge work sectors. And there's a lot of worry about how AI is going to break this talent pipeline, also in, for example, in law firms or in consultancy firms. I see a few people nodding, so I want to hear from your organizations, how are you dealing with this problem of the potential breaking of the talent pipeline, or if you actually see this in job vacancies?
I can start with the job vacancies and then maybe you can chime in. I'm actually very confused / skeptical about these things. We hear a lot of different claims on this, and it, depending on the days, is a different group of workers that has been affected. So that's where my skepticism comes in. On the anecdote about research, do research, I share what you said. I think we all agree on that. But it is a little bit more complex, I think, because what you were saying earlier in terms, Alex, of AI defaults to the medium, to the average. And so I think that varies from like the skills that each of us has. We have different bundles of skills. So if we go back to the concept of unbundling jobs, we can also unbundle ourselves and think of ourselves as Lego blocks of different skills. And we all have different combinations of skills. And when we think about AI and implementation of AI in our jobs and in our work, I would want to keep my expertise on some things because I'm an expert and so I'm above the machine, if you want to put it that way. But in other things, there are not very strong points for me. I want the help for the machine. And Laura, we are both researchers, but you may have different strength points compared than me, and so use the machine in a different way. And so I think in that sense, it's a little bit more complex. And so it's not necessarily only about the younger workers and their entry-level tasks, that there are challenges, but it could be in different parts of the organization. And also we touched earlier on the middle management or the middle layer being affected. And I think, again, it goes back to the point of defaulting to the middle. The middle manager is the middle. And then there's also the other part of the equation in terms of older workers. Because so far we talked about, we are kind of like assuming or taking for granted that people are embracing AI, but not everyone is. Not all the workers are using it. And when we look at the demographics of the people that are using AI, they tend to be overwhelmingly male, young, and highly educated. So there's a whole bunch of people that we're not even touching here in this discussion.
Thank you. I'll get to the point of the pipeline in a second. Although I do agree with Elena that a lot is being said about AI replacing young workers. I think it really depends on the sector, and this is true in general for the impact of AI. But let me perhaps, just to be clear, because I was told what is the position of the Commission, which I think I know fairly well. The Commission has been very, very clear that competitiveness is a goal together with social cohesion. We need to be crystal clear here. And another thing that the President of the Commission, who, by the way, and I say this with all the respect for President von der Leyen, but she does not get to decide where Europe goes, because we are democracies. The Commission proposes, co-legislator legislate, and there are a bunch of other institutions, some would say too many, but in any case, that play a role. But in any case, the Commission has been very clear that there is no future competitiveness in Europe without quality jobs. And therefore, the question becomes, is the kind of unbundling that we're seeing there the ideal solution in every sector and in every situation to achieve quality jobs? I'm not saying it's not, but that is the debate. The debate is not saying, well, now there is AI, we go straight ahead, we unbundle everything, and that's going to give us competitiveness. People are free to believe that, but that is not the position of the European Commission. We need to be very clear on this point. Now, in terms of the future pipeline, on the one hand, clearly, obviously, but everybody agrees on this, so I don't need to spend too much time on it. Obviously, we need to change our education systems, and we need to change our approach to how to develop skills. In many countries, including my own country, Italy, the education system was basically created in an industrial age to create factory workers. That's how the public education system was created. It's training. We can see that it doesn't work anymore, so we need to modify that, and I believe that's true also in other European countries. But the real question is, how much do organizations want to invest in young people? Because where sometimes I confess I'm a little bit confused is when I hear many organizations saying, no, not anybody in this panel, but we hear it quite often in the conversations we have, especially with the private sector, is basically, well, AI is coming, we can't do anything but not hire young people. But that's a decision that organizations take. And if you believe that an AI system is more valuable for you as an organization over the long term than a young worker who will become an experienced worker, that is your decision. I think it may be true in some cases. It's certainly not true in other cases. But this is the point I really want to stress. At the end of the day, it's the decision of the organization whether they want to consider, as I think was mentioned by you, Laura, they want to consider labor as a cost or as an investment. That's their decision. There is, frankly, quite little that we can do from a regulator perspective to change that.
Did you, Laura, want to comment first before I speak again? So yeah, I mean, I just hear everything we're saying, and I'm wondering, nobody opposes these trends and the way we analyze them. Of course, you can see one trend here, one trend there. So we're talking about many things at the same time. Maybe while we're talking about competitiveness, I think we are referring to basically a few European champions that we want to see driving industrial ability, productivity, and innovation to levels that we haven't seen in Europe lately. So maybe for this kind of industry, you are not looking at the entire economy and the single market where the unbundling could apply from travel agencies to you know, a huge spectrum of work. So I think we need to always keep some space in the back of our minds to make space for the unique, the extraordinary that could possibly flourish in the single market, and at the same time also, of course, talk about this unbundling and what it could mean and how to avoid its adverse social effects.
I'll touch on 2 points, a response, and then also I want to touch on the middle management point. And yeah, to be clear, I mean, obviously social cohesion is really important, and I think it'll become more important if you get unemployment because of AI. What you need is a compromise where you're saying, okay, maybe we're making it easier to loosen labor laws, maybe we're making it easier to be a more dynamic economy, but at the same time, we're going to be really robust with our social welfare, and we're going to be really robust with our unemployment insurance, and making sure that if you are losing your job because of AI, you're not being left in and out of it. And on the point about, you know, we want competitiveness comes from these big national champions, these really big players. Yes, that's true, but it's also really hard to predict where these national champions, where these big wins are going to come from ahead of the time. And so you really need to make sure that you're solving the problem across the board so that across Europe, where there's that little seedling, that little ember that will grow into the next Google, grow into the next Spotify, we don't have the system that sort of slams it down and says, no, you can't take a risk. No, you can't hire a bunch of people because if you go bankrupt, you're over, right? So we've got to find the right compromise there. On the middle management, I think this is interesting because I think there are two ways of actually looking at this around, will middle management decrease or will middle management actually increase? And so we were doing some research in the way that AI will change new organizations, sort of AI native organizations. I'm saying, how will AI affect this? And we say, okay, what are humans bad at? Humans tend to be bad at communication. Humans tend to be bad at epistemics, sort of saying, I think there's a 30% chance of this happening. I think this will never happen. We have a bunch of biases. On communication and interpersonal communication, you have this little curve that appears when you scale the size of an organization. You go from 0 people to 5 people to 15 people to 50 people. And as you go up that curve, more and more of your time, more and more of your man hours in the organization is spent on interpersonal communication, is spent on translating all the ideas, all the wonderful products between the different people. You get the complexity of the organization grows. And you can sort of model this in saying, okay, everyone can sort of handle maybe 5 people beneath them. So you've got your CEO, 5 people, 5 managers, and then managers have like 5 research leads, and then research leads have like 5 people over them. So you have like 5 cube, you have like 125 people in your org, right? Now, let's say an AI system changes that. Let's say the AI system makes you more efficient in your communication so that now each person can manage 7 people, or now each person can manage 10 people. You're dealing with an exponential. So now you've got 10, 10, 10, 10. You've gone from 125 to 1,000 people at the same effectiveness. And so you can do 2 things. So you can, on the margin, you can grow your organization much bigger, and you can sort of be an organization of hundreds of people and still operate with the efficiency of a startup. Or you can take large existing organizations and you can sort of restructure and shift around the management to sort of keep your same size, but then shrink back down to the efficiency of a lower scale. So I think in these ways, you can sort of change the way the middle management works in different ways.
I think that's very interesting, and actually we are also thinking about this inside SEBS, how AI can improve communication or coordination across people, across tasks. And the way that you describe this is you put the focus on the improvement in the coordination within the organization, allowing it to grow bigger. But you can make the same argument about coordination in the market, actually, and outsourcing more and more tasks to the market and having the organization itself either becoming smaller, like a Shine type of startup, or the organization becoming the platform that coordinates all of these outsourced tasks, like Uber platforms and things like that. Are there any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to this organization and management part also, because it's one, as I think Laura was mentioning, the opportunities, but also the issues around algorithmic management are really something that is keeping me and my team occupied quite a lot these days. Let me make you a couple of observations. First, we actually, not with the OECD, but we work very closely with the OECD, we actually asked managers what they thought about these systems. There was a survey, unfortunately not all across the EU, it was only for member states, plus the US and Japan. And what was very interesting is that while in the US, you had an enormous use of this automated system by managers, okay, that this was a survey really focusing on managers. It was pretty low in Japan, and quite low, I mean, compared to the US, quite low in Europe. But the more interesting part is why. Why managers didn't use these systems too much. And the responses of the managers, among the top reasons why they were not very confident in using these AI automated systems for managing, is that the managers did not trust these systems. They did not understand how they achieved certain results, given a certain input to the results. The managers were quite worried about the impact on safety and health of their workers, including psychological health. I think that, look, I don't want to really to sound combative here, because I think there is an opportunity there. It's true, technology has always allowed organizations to grow and become more efficient. But we also need to stop for a moment and look at the facts of how these technologies actually work. Because it's one thing to build experiments in a laboratory setting. It's another thing to try to talk to an AI chatbot to fix a problem. And if anybody has ever tried to do it, you know that it doesn't work very well. That's the status of the technology that we have today. Maybe it will improve a lot, but at the moment, we're not there yet. So before we go to workers and managers and board members and investors, and we basically tell them, look, the way that organization has been working until now, it's old, it doesn't work, it's not your position, I understand, but I'm exaggerating a little bit because AI is coming. Okay, I think we need to get a little better data in real world situations across sectors, because you, Alex, you mentioned a lot, I understand you work for a think tank, you talk about researchers, but the European economy is also based on plumbers, is also based on the hospitality sector, is also based on the miners, on a lot of people that do different jobs. They're all worthy of respect, they all have their dignity, but they have very different requirements, and also the management of those jobs has very different requirements. So all I'm trying to do here is to, yes, we should be optimistic, absolutely. I'm a big believer in technology, and trust me, working digital employment, I need to fight every day with people who barely can turn on and off a computer, okay? I hope no colleague is listening to me now, but there is a certain resistance. I'm joking and exaggerating. There is a certain cultural resistance in many organizations. That is not my position, but I'm also very reluctant to go, based on the technology that we see today, to go and say, okay, now we can replace middle managers. I don't see that happening without having to waste double our time as workers trying to clarify to an AI what it is that we actually want, that a human being would have understood in half the time.
Can I agree with it?
Yes.
Yes, please. Very rare agreement. Hopefully more. I want to agree with you on plumbers, right? Like AI won't radically change the way plumbers work. Right? It's okay, why should we change? Why should we care about that? We're on a panel about how AI affects the economy. Well, it matters, again, because it's bottlenecks again, right? If AI makes one sector way more productive, that sector increases 20% by productivity, the other sector becomes the bottleneck, right? Let's say like we have a massive housing crisis across most of Europe. Let's say like our economy increases by 15%, our wages increase by 15%, our housing supply and our housing prices don't change at all. All of those gains go back into the fixed costs. All of those gains go back into the energy costs, go back into the housing costs. They go back into the things that we haven't fixed. And so you can't be having this conversation talking about all the ways AI can change these different jobs without talking about the things that it won't change and actually sort of being serious about how we can talk to those people, be like, how can we make your jobs better? How can we actually solve the bottlenecks to you? Because they actually become the more, like, the non-AI workers become the more important workers in this conversation.
Plumbers would just raise their prices, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Elena?
Well, actually, on that point of the plumbers, there's one thing that we haven't discussed today, but AI is affecting parts of the labor market that up until now had plenty of, like, they were stable, were not the parts of the labor market where we have the labor shortages, where we needed actually AI to perhaps solve some of the bottlenecks, because plumbers, construction workers, there were already bottlenecks there in terms of needing supply of workers there. But I also wanted to take your question or your comment about better coordination between organizations in another direction, which is, it's very interesting that you're saying that, because one of the parts of the labor market where we do have evidence of AI negatively affecting employment is that on freelancer. So that's one of the few areas where there is some indicative research that says is shrinking the number of people working there. Whereas you're basically suggesting that it could go the other way. We could all kind of like become freelancers because we're all specialized in an area. And so there, the point I wanted to make is that it's truly up to us right now to shape this discourse, because we've seen it in a few examples today. It can really go either way. And it's changing really fast, and it's on us right now to be intentional about the way that we want to take that. And to do that, we need to be more agile. And to be more agile, to me, goes back to the beginning of this discussion about unbundling. Because if we unbundle the skills, if we unbundle the task, then we are better able to faster re-put them together in a way that is more efficient for all of us.
I'm going to pose one more question to the panel, and then I'm going to open to the room, so you can start preparing some questions if you have any. Elena and everyone, so many of you touched on the aspect of inclusion and also worker resistance or acceptance of new technologies and quality jobs and innovation, but they all go together. It's not only the question is, does innovation lead to quality jobs, but also what's the role of job quality in innovation? Because it's the people that come up with innovation, and where do people do that best? In quality jobs, in jobs that give them room for learning and for trying and failing and trying again, and for autonomy, and where they can try new technologies and reject them if they don't work for them, and improve them until they work for them. So just wanted to hear your reflections on that link between innovation and job quality, or what we can do from policy side, or from tech developer side, or from employer side to stimulate that quality job environment for innovation. And then we're going to open to the room.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, that's an interesting question, because I believe there's probably no direct causality between innovation and quality of work. But maybe sometimes, you know, we're asking questions that we will always go in circles trying to answer them. And I just stay back on my previous statement that I think lots of these developments are happening organically, and every organization drives it in a bit of their own way. You need some general guidance, of course, but you always need to leave room for the extraordinary and the unique to grow. And you need to, you know, you need to allow what we call in literature poetic license. You know, in some cases you need to leave this incredible people that can think of something super innovative, and I'm sure that these people will find their work a little bit more meaningful than before if they are let to deliver at that level, or whatever that level could be. So yeah.
I'm really happy that you made the point, Laura, which we didn't agree before, right? Because it is indeed a very clear position of the Commission that you cannot be competitive, as I said, you cannot innovate, you cannot move forward as a continent, as a society, unless from a workplace perspective, you don't have quality jobs, or as many quality jobs as possible. Now, what is a quality job? The debate is raging, and it depends on the sector. There are certain characteristics, however, that we all agree, including the member states, are characteristic of a quality job, and those include that you should not be afraid of being fired the next 5 minutes. So I'm sure that's not what you meant, but when I hear some people saying, well, we should all become freelancer and we should all, I mean, careful with that, because that kind of society in which every worker is basically disposable, depending on the market situation, is also a world in which people, the worker themselves, have absolutely no interest to contribute to the success of the organization. That's quite logical. And because in order to innovate, you need to have resources that organizations can give. We risk creating a completely atomized, if that were the world in which we're moving in, we risk creating a completely atomized labor market in which organizations cannot really grow, or at least they cannot produce the kind of trust from their own workers that is necessary in order for innovation to actually flourish. Now, some have said that our labor markets are too tight or they are too inflexible. I think that's a much bigger debate that we cannot have here. To some extent, I can even agree. But let us also be very careful not to go in a direction of other countries in which labor protection basically does not exist. Look, and this I say it on a personal level, it's not the position of the Commission. I am very attached to the United States of America for personal reasons, for my own life experience. I think we Europeans, there are a couple of things that we could learn from Americans, from the US. But when we tell the story about OpenAI and all the big innovation, we also need to look at the dark side of that country. We also need what it means to live and work and in the US, and not all what happens if you lose your job, you lose your health insurance, you lose all your protections. So, sorry, I don't mean to dampen the mood here. I remain an optimist. But when we think about all of these things, we really need also to keep in mind which kind of society, of model of society we want to work in. And I remain convinced that we can be a society which is productive, which is competitive, maybe does not get first everywhere, but you know what, in order to be successful, you don't need to be first everywhere, because you can get second and learn from what the first one has done. So let's also put the ego aside a little bit. These, I think, are the really important questions that we need to ask ourselves. And then at the end of it, we ask, okay, how can AI help us achieve those goals that we want to achieve?
So I agree we can have the ambition. We can have the ambition to achieve all these things. But I don't think it's a story of are we trying to come first or second. I think it's a story of like, are we coming second or are we coming last, right? And we shouldn't copy America exactly, right? It's a bit of a straw man. I think that, like, it's great if everyone has a quality job. It's also great if everyone has an exciting job, right? And a job that brings us forward. Here's the thing, my personal opinion is that in the current productive capacity of the European Union, we do not have enough productive capacity, we do not have enough new companies, we do not have enough GDP to support everyone having a quality job. I think if we pressed the button and we tried to make everything quality, we'd run out of jobs, and then there'd be a bunch of people who would be without a job if we raise that bar up and say every job has to be above this quality. And so what's the solution? We need to create more jobs. We need to create more companies. We need to create more opportunities that then lead you to those high quality jobs. And so I think we have to be really careful that in the pursuit of high quality jobs, we don't pull up the ladder and we don't damage the mechanism that creates the high quality jobs in the first place. And we won't get into a debate about is our labor market too restrictive, because I agree that we won't be able to get to any resolution. But just that you gave America as an example, and I agree that we can learn lots of things from America, both positive and negative. To give another example, I think we can look at Denmark. And we can look at Denmark because they have these actually quite loose labor laws. You really can fire people really easily, but they have this really generous social welfare. And look at Denmark, they've got Novo Nordisk, right? Yeah. One of Europe's most successful companies, making tons of money off of a bunch of, well, overweight Americans now, but, you know, making us a lot of money. I mean, basically all of Denmark's GDP growth over the last few years has been this one company. So I think that that's a European story that we can look to and say, hey, look, they've made a compromise, they've made a trade-off. And I think we have to be honest about the fact that good quality jobs don't come just by manifesting them and by raising the bar. They come from people having big ideas and then creating new companies, and then these new companies being able to supply the new jobs. So I guess I'm sort of saying the jobs don't lead to the companies lead to the jobs.
I just had one little point to make, because at some point, I think it was you, Andrea, you mentioned investments at some point. And I think that all of these nice things that you are talking about, Alex, are basically going to be enabled also through investments. We need more initiatives that give this kind of aspiring vision to become to people in the workforce with skills and everything they have there, so that they can compete with others, they can grow themselves, they can see an opportunity for themselves. And it's not always a clear trajectory from being an intern to then going to a great place to work. So we need more initiatives like that. And lots of these things, of course, here in Brussels, we always say that should come from the Commission. But like Andrea said previously, this is indeed a national competence. I think, right, a few countries together can drive a lot more change at their own, within their own borders, and provide the right initiatives with their own educational system, which is a national competence, and the curriculum, etc. So this is what we need, I think, in my opinion, among very many other things that everybody has mentioned. These are extremely important. We need to create space for investments so that people can actually be part of this change and not just look at it from the outside and be afraid of it.
Elena, any response? And then you can raise your hands and I'll start taking questions.
Yeah, I was actually going in the same direction as Andrea, like look at the US and what's happening there. And one of the, we don't have much research on that, but one of the things that we've started looking into is this new concept of 966 that is emerging in the tech world. 966 is, there used to be a 9 to 5, Monday, Friday. 966 is now 9 to 6, Monday, Friday, 6 till Saturday. So, and this whole idea is within the tech bubble in the US, there's this pressure to innovate, and so you work longer. And so to the question of, is this creating, like, how does this link to quality jobs? I'm not sure, and I'm a bit skeptical about what that will lead. And also the other point I was going to make is that, I don't know if it's just that a lot of money is being thrown into AI. And so there is a lot of pressure for it to perform the way we want it. But maybe the pace of this change is happening at a different pace on the ground. And so maybe we need to give it more time if we want to make sure that we pair the quality jobs and the innovation.
Oh, yes, yes.
It's just that, yeah, I heard about the 966 model from the US. I think the Chinese also have a different one that is, I will just say, if as a company, if as a private sector player, that is your way to be more innovative, is to make people work more, then you're not being very smart about it. Because the history of industries is industry actually working fewer hours in a more efficient way. I just wanted to put, no, I know we agree, I know that's not your position.
Okay, 5 more seconds, but then start raising your hand. So
yeah,
that,
I'll just say, like, these, from the perspective of these employees, I do think they have a quality job, because, you know, these are very talented people. These are the top of the market. They could choose to come over to Europe, come take our quality jobs. We have a much nicer quality of lifestyle than America. So you really say, why aren't they moving here for these quality jobs? From the leading AI.
Yes, but they are. We see the numbers. There is an increasing inflow of workers from the US, exactly because the pace is becoming unbearable in many sectors.
I agree, but in the very, very high margin of these AI companies, I'm skeptical. But I broadly agree.
Fascinating discussion. In any case, I see Robert and Scott, and then 2 more. But yeah, maybe I'll collect a few.
Okay, well, at the risk of opening something a little too broad. Okay, I've got to swallow the mic. Very good. Okay, got it. Okay, so at the risk of opening up something too broad, I really would be interested in hearing your views on the changing role of social protection related to the fact that artificial intelligence obviously doesn't operate in a vacuum. It's happening in parallel with other changes in the labor market. You started to talk about a move to freelancing, but there's really a broader shift away from traditional employment, both to freelancing and to non-traditional forms of employment. You've also got a trend that was accelerated through COVID to work at home, or basically to spending less time in the office. So all of these things are shifting. Now, if you look at the moves from the European Commission, there was an absolutely great initiative from DG Employment primarily, the European Pillar of Social Rights. But it seems to me that what we can, I'd be interested in knowing how much that's actually produced. The fundamental problem is, I think, exactly the one that Andrea Gloriosa flagged, which is that the competence of the European Union is really very limited in all of these areas. And as long as we're limited to weak measures like the European semester, it's hard. So basically, you know, how does all of this fit together, and what can we really do to ensure in this overall changing work environment that workers are adequately protected?
Great. I'm going to collect 3 questions now and then do another round of 3. So Robert and then the man behind.
Yes, I heard Elena saying being above or beyond or below the algorithm, and a friend in autonomous driving told me this week truck drivers want to keep driving trucks, but I predict in a few years we don't need them anymore. What are we going to do?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm David. I'm from Verizon. I have one question on a topic that has been slightly touched upon already, which I believe is one of those second-order effects of AI, and it is related to the educational system. So how does the panel think that the educational system should embrace AI? But more importantly, how do you think can the educational system prepare the workforce of tomorrow for a job in AI?
Great. So the 3 questions were from Scott on the role of AI in the bigger changing work environment, the non-standard forms of work, the work from home, and how all that fits together. Then Robert on what are we going to do when trucks drive themselves, and David on how the educational system should or should not embrace AI. Just pick 1 or 2 that you want to answer, and then.
It was Scott, right? Very quick on that. It looks quite difficult to do this because it's not a competency. One place you might be able to do this is maybe like you could sneak something in. I mean, I know it's going to be very difficult already, but you could possibly sneak something into the 28th regime about sort of this startup entity. And you could say, okay, we're not solving this for all of Europe, but maybe we can solve this for tech workers and say, okay, easy to fire them, but also they have all of this robust security. And maybe that's like your canary in the coal mine of like, if tech workers start being fired, maybe other countries can look at this and say, hey, we've done this for them. Maybe we can consider it for ourselves. For Robert, I mean, in some places, truck drivers have been automated. I mean, I was reading about the Port of Antwerp and the fact that they still have these really strong unions and they still haven't automated their port operations and all the different, there was this report about how that's leading to drug trafficking across Belgium because of all the bribery and stuff. I'm like, we've had automated ports for a very long time and the Port of Antwerp still hasn't automated. So this is a choice that places can make for themselves, and they can choose to bear the benefits and the downsides. I think that we're much more likely to actually choose not to do it and not get the benefits and not sort of have that nice transition than the other way around. And the last question was on education. Yeah. Yes. Very quick. I think that the transition period for education might be something that you have to really pay attention to, because I think, you know, those best students are really going to benefit, but those like worse students, the ones who are like maybe a bit more prone to, as I was, being like lazy and just being like, ChatGPT, solve it, please. Those you have to really pay attention to. But I'm generally quite bullish. I think that you look at like private tutoring, you look at the benefit of private tutoring, you're like one-on-one time with a student is clearly immensely powerful. And if AI means you can have more quasi one-on-one time with students, then this seems just an amazing thing.
So pick 1 of the 3 because I want to do another round. So we don't have time for everyone to answer all of the questions, but pick your favorite one.
That's very difficult, but I will just very briefly on the social protection side. And this is a point on which I certainly agree with Alex. And it's important to keep in mind that our social protection system costs a lot of money. That money comes from taxes, basically. And in order to have that money, we need to have a productive economy. So there is no disagreement there. Now, as you also point out, Scott, our competence as the union on social protection system is very limited. Member states are extremely jealous of their national competence there. One might argue also because it tends to produce electoral results one way or the other, but that's for them to decide. What we have seen, however, what we have done is do quite a bit of analysis also with Eurofound, the agency, the foundation for, Eurofound, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's an important EU agency. Thank you, for standards of living, working and living. We have done several studies on the digitalization of social protection systems, and again, there are opportunities and challenges. Digitalization can certainly help optimize certain back-end processes. It can help with the front end, meaning that we've seen that, especially in some countries, for younger people, reaching them through digital means, it helps to make sure that people know which rights they're entitled to, which from our perspective is a good thing because it means that the system is working. At the same time, we have had, and we shouldn't make, we shouldn't draw conclusion from it, but we also need to be very clear-eyed that we already have had at least 2 major cases in 2 countries, the Netherlands and France, in which the uncontrolled use of automation and AI has produced huge problems in the misallocation or in the discrimination of people who had the right to, mostly migrants, who had the right to benefits and they did not. So I think that, yes, we think there are opportunities there, but we also need to proceed very, very calmly, because after jobs, if there is one area where people will really go on the street and burn things, is if social protection systems stop working properly. So we have to be very careful to touch those systems.
Thank you. Just on the last part, on the educational part, I mean, I don't think I'm in a position to claim expertise in that space, but I do think that looking at the adoption levels, comparing the latest Eurostat result that you mentioned, 13% adoption by SMEs, and when you look at other economies that we, as the single market, compete with, namely the US and China, but I think China here is the most interesting case, is that the adoption rates are approximately 80%. So we don't have the social governance system that China has to enforce something like that, and for good reason. But we need to deal with it somehow, and maybe we need to have an obligatory part in the curriculum of schools to also have education in AI and what are its uses and how to facilitate all of this in the professions that students will aspire to do in the future. So they need to keep in mind that this is also part of the equation and they need to address it somehow.
I'm actually also going to talk about education, because that's one of the things I'm most passionate about in relation to AI. And actually, I think that's one of the areas where I'm grateful to AI for actually forcing the education system to change, in the sense that one of the things that's traditional about education is that they are too slow to change compared to the business world. And traditionally, education, university have looked to business for guidance on what to do, what kind of skills to train for, etc. And now that link has been broken by AI because the change is too fast. And so can we be prepared? I don't know, but I think we are going to be forced to do that. And in the data and what we're seeing, there are a couple of things that education can do. First, it's more about AI literacy rather than AI concentration degrees. So you don't need to create a new master degree that is only on AI. You need to integrate AI in your marketing course, in your finance, etc. And second is about being faster and more agile in the system, goes back to the unbundling, also unbundling of training. So do we need 3 years degree? Can we have shorter courses? Is that an option? And then third one, and it goes back to one of the slides I had, one of the biggest things that education trains us for is not actually the technical skills, but it's the skills that make us work with one another, that can help us think critically about AI, and so invest more on those skills.
Thank you. So we're approaching the end of the program. Maybe just one, yes, very quick question.
Hi, my name is Jan. I work as a researcher, PhD student, but also a practitioner. I actually work in companies to do these kind of changes, to help these changes happen. I was a bit worried. I realized that I'm amongst people that are in policy and so on, where we talk about how hard can it be, and especially the piece about unbundling, I was appalled, honestly. So thank you also, Andrea, for mentioning Taylorism and scientific management, because it's a lot harder than you think in practice. It doesn't work that way, right? There are people and it wasn't work that way. To the next point, so it doesn't work that way. That's the first point. It happens over very different industries and jobs. That was very much important to mention as well. A job is not a job is not a job. Doing research with LLMs is not the same thing as working at an industry site of Michelin. It's a very different thing. And the last thing, and that's something that I didn't hear anything about, is how are we going to help the people to learn to work with the AI? in the workplace. We have no clue. I'm an educational psychologist by training. We have no clue what happens in the mutual human AI learning in real time in a factory. So there's a huge thing that we actually don't know, and it can go for the better or it can go for worse. And we don't have a clue for the moment. So that's my take.
Yes, one quick reaction, and then I'm going to keep that topic for the next panel, because then we can fill a whole hour on that. But Andrea, you want to respond?
No, it's not just because Jan agrees with me, but I think he raises, which is always nice. but just this point about human, I mean, you know that we used to talk about human-machine interaction. It's an old discipline. We've been looking at that. And indeed, if I can kind of, as the commission, I can ask everybody in the room, that's, from my perspective, really what to focus on. Because we keep on thinking and something is a positive thing, something is a negative thing about the replacement. But that's not what historically has happened with technology, except in very few cases. Technology has integrated human labor. Sometimes it has augmented, sometimes it has made it more difficult. So the focus for us is really understanding, and maybe we don't need policy and regulation for that, it's likely, but we do need to understand better how do we use AI in all jobs, in all sectors, to augment human capabilities, to augment human labor. And then, as others said, we allow companies to take decisions. We allow human beings, workers, to decide what they want to do, where they want to go, and so on and so forth. But that's where the technology development and our focus on these technologies should be.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up here, but please join me in thanking the speakers. And then before, yes, you are free to go. Then before I hand the mic back to Andrea to wrap up, PA and I actually want to call someone else to the stage who never gets to be on stage with us, but who was super crucial for making a successful project out of this. She's always working very hard in the background. Even today, she's sitting there in the back. It's our project officer who is recently promoted to research manager, Katja. She does so many hidden things, from budgets to reports, but also she's a video producer, a podcast scheduler, a social
keynote on AI.
A social media manager. But most of all, she's one of the kindest persons I've ever had the pleasure to working with. So thank you, Katja.
And Laura, you talk about the non-so-hidden things, that we know about Katja. I mean, of course, she's super kind. She was a wonderful project officer. I'm going to tell you a few things about the things that you didn't know about Katja. The first thing is we talked about the AI world that has a lot of traction. One of the reasons for that is that pretty much everyone of your friends and family are basically the first users, the early adopters of AI worlds. Your grandma as well. The second thing is you should see Katja reacting to Robert's and Francisco jokes on a daily basis. So only for that you deserve a promotion. And the last thing, maybe not all of you knows that she was actually the producer of the AI World movie. So you really went above and beyond, so it's very well deserved. Super happy to have you here.
All right. Thanks also on my end, of course, to Katja and everybody else, the data science team, all the events team, etc., that have put together this event today, the researchers that have co-authored publications throughout this project for 2 years. Of course, we don't stop here. There's so much more coming up, more publications from this project, the Sovereign AI explainer that is coming up, that it will incorporate some of the also insights that we've gathered today. But of course, this is the beginning of an adventure, right, for us. AI world will see new iterations. Our research on AI will go now deeper. apply AI strategy, the international standardization and the role of the EU in the world in AI, the human machine interactions. We are at CEPS in something like 5 Horizon Europe projects that are dedicated to human-machine decision-making and co-decision, let's say, and integration, but also an ambitious research project that tries to understand what alternative scenarios exist for AI to impact profoundly or not the way in which we organize the interactions within organizations and how this scales up to different forms of economic phenomena and economic institutions, right? We talk about, even when we study economics, we talk about the nature of the firm, right? The fact that the firm is the center of the organization of the economy. And indeed, this is as a historical phenomenon, right? We talk about platforms, we talk about big conglomerates. Things can come up, institutions can morph because constraints change. Just like we change the way in which we study, whatever, biology in different habitats. I mean, different forms of life emerge because of different constraints, right? And so we at CEPS combine the academic expertise, the applied policy expertise, to bring the deepest, hopefully, deepest academic thinking in different disciplines all the way into anticipating change and inspiring. Can also, of course, talk about something else, okay? Thanks a lot, everybody.